Chapter 1041. The fall of the Hundred Eyes settlement wasn't secret. In fact, when the two sides were fighting, they had already attracted the attention of countless parties. Whether it was the magic eye, water mirror, divination, or some other strange method, everyone was paying close attention to the process and outcome of this battle. Unexpectedly, as soon as they opened their eyes, they saw it all. No more. A fierce battle? No. A life and death battle? No. There was only a big pot of stewing, boiling water, and cabbage. Forster's shot made many people's hair stand on end. Then, Fleischer's methods made their hearts turn cold. If they were dead, they were dead. Why did they have to whip their corpses? In the end, who was the one from hell? For a moment, the terrifying danger brought about by the two people who had appeared weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. This included the 4 crowned people led by the Death Skull settlement. It was the idea of the 5 crowned people to release the Shadow Beast to attack. In the end, the huge 5 Eyes was gone just like that. It was all for nothing. On the night when the 5 Eyes were chilled to the bone, countless tribes activated their secret devices and were on full alert, fearing that this group of unknown people would take advantage of the victory and pursue them to eliminate them completely. In the end, the group of kobolds turned around and went back. They even went back and forth several times to bring back the mountain of iron ingots. As for the rest, they didn't even look at it. This made people feel sad and angry that not only did the wolves not come, but they also looked down on them. Although they were sad and angry, they still had to change their lives. However, they couldn't go on doing nothing. After all, such a big scourge was squatting right next to their home. Everyone would feel uneasy, and even if they weren't, they would feel uneasy. Not to mention, there was the tragic fate of the Hundred Eyes settlement and the blood tax from the fallen kingdom. The entire Rusty Pagoda Forest was in chaos. The atmosphere in the Death Skull settlement was gloomy. There's nothing else to say. No matter what the other party's goal is, we can only fight against them by gathering together. The leader of the Death Skull settlement, Undead, said, "I'm willing to abide by the contract and open up the defense of the Death Skull settlement to you. We'll gather our forces and fight against the enemy together. I hope that everyone won't fight among themselves at this time. Only by uniting can we have a future." At this time, the most panicked person was undoubtedly Undead. After all, its hometown was the closest to Dragonscale settlement. Back then, in order to control this group of kobolds, it had specially ordered them to move the settlement into its territory. Who would have thought that they would meet with a calamity now? What an unlucky bastard. The others naturally didn't have anything to say. Everyone understood that if the lips were gone, the teeth would be cold. What's more, even if others exhausted their opponents when it was their turn, would they have the confidence to take them down? Under the pressure of the blood tax for a long time, the Rusty Pagoda Forest had faintly shown signs of integration, and it was not the first time they had joined forces. Everyone knew that once they fell apart, no one would be able to continue controlling the Rusty Pagoda Forest. They would not be able to get the other tribes to obediently pay the blood tax for them. What about asking for help? The giant worm asked, "Are we just going to sit back and do nothing when our country is destroyed? Now that the fallen nation is busy with the War of the Worlds, where would they have the time to care about us?" Undead coldly snorted, "I finally managed to connect the channels, but as soon as the tax collector heard that we weren't paying blood tax, he began to deal with people. Guess what they said? They told us to wait patiently, and there will definitely be reinforcements. They're lying to the goblins. If we rely on them, we won't even have ashes left." For a moment, everyone's hearts turned cold. Even if they knew that this life-saving straw would most likely not be of any use. Now that the straw had turned rotten before it was even used, how could they restrain the resentment and sadness in their hearts? What's more, even if it was just for show, it was better than using this kind of nonsense to fool them, right? If that's the case, that's all we can do. The insect lord let out an ear-piercing cry. The monstrous monsters made up of countless twisted limbs, and the giant harpies had no other choice as well. At this point, don't be stingy, everyone. Take out all your weapons, Undead said. I just hope that when the time comes, we won't drag each other down. The monster said vaguely, Morning Mountain settlement will take out the snake drum. I will let the children bring the lightning-splitting spears, the harpy responded. But we need you to provide food. Naturally, Undead nodded. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, in addition, I want to unseal that relic. There was a long, dead silence. The crown wearers looked at each other and couldn't help but be shocked. They angrily questioned, are you crazy? Can you afford to pay that kind of price? When they sealed that damned thing, they sacrificed more than half of the large group and even injured themselves for hundreds of years before they took down the rusty pagoda forest. Even if the natives were long gone, this hell still left behind the last treasure, and at the same time, the deepest curse. In order to get things done once and for all, they used the most thorough method to seal the crisis. Now that they wanted to reopen it, they had to offer a great sacrifice, and at that time, they might not have the ability to deal with it. Do we have to do this? The harpy asked. Undead's eye sockets shone with a cold light as he asked, compared to now, which is worse? No one spoke again. In the end, there were only murmurs full of hatred. Do we have any other choice? Under the gaze of Undead, there were no other voices. The resolution to fight to the death was thus passed. Next, it was the unsealing ceremony. A large number of slaves, deformed children, and sacrifices from various settlements were beheaded and bled by the priests, and thrown into the bottomless pit in the center of the Death Skull settlement, until the rotten blood overflowed from it. After a day of praising and presiding over it, a strange light emerged from it, illuminating the face of Undead. The seal was about to be unsealed. Undead grinned like a hideous grin. He could feel the terrifying power that emerged from it. He could also feel the tremors of the earth. A loud noise burst out from the distance, causing the earth to shake. The loud noise rose like thunder, echoing repeatedly in the narrow sky. Then, fanatical praises sounded. Under the broken tower, on the road outside the Death Skull settlement, countless banners were raised high, and the sacred emblem from Bahamut flapped in the wind. Kobolds covered in heavy armor carried banners on their backs and did their best to throw themselves into the great praises. They could not wait to step onto the path of war. In the past, there were hundreds and thousands of cannon fodders. At this moment, when they gathered together and sang feverishly, their eyes were filled with an incomprehensible brilliance. The fanaticism made people's scalps tingle. It was as if the owner had opened the cage and released the chains, so the hunting dogs flew out. They covered the mountains and plains without any order, and at the same time, without any scruples, they pounced on their enemies. Fire! Fire! On the city wall of the Death Skull settlement, the commander shouted and blew the horn with all his might. Suddenly, countless molten fires spewed out from the huge cannons on the city wall. Thick smoke billowed from the scarlet lava as it arced through the air. When it landed on the ground, it suddenly exploded, setting off countless waves of air out of nowhere. But it did not hit many people at all. It did not even stop the kobolds from continuing to charge mindlessly. At this moment, their minds were filled with the great brilliance of the final dragon, Bahamut. Their eyes were burning red, and they did not stop at all. These guys had no concept of cooperation and formations in their minds at all. Their formation was like sassafras, without any rules and tactics. However, it was this kind of scattered formation tactic that avoided the damage caused by the artillery fire to the greatest extent. Then, what emerged from the end of the earth was billowing smoke. The steel chariots, assembled with all the treasures of Dragonscale settlement, rattled noisily. Some of the mechanical monsters made of simple steel had 6 wheels, some had caterpillar tracks, and some had 8 legs like spiders, crawling on the ground. After being modified by Anton and Gregory, almost all the leftovers were used on them. After a complete iteration and renewal, they had been reborn and reborn. Bahamut's sacred emblem fluttered on every chariot. It was branded with a huge, rough, and ferocious dog head. Endless greed was contained in it, and it smiled coldly at the hell in front of it. But the smoke that covered the sky did not come from these tiny specks of dust. Instead, it was a bigger shadow. It was darker, more violent, and more ferocious. It was some kind of huge and strange existence. On the city wall, the gargoyle almost crushed the crude telescope in his hand. He could not believe his eyes. It was a warship, under the protection of the undead army and the white-scaled guards. A huge warship was moving on the ground. Its terrifying weight crushed the ground, leaving a straight gully. Gentle ripples of water enveloped its surroundings, causing rocks to shatter and barren hills to crumble. Everything that stood in its way was simply trampled into mud. It left a pitch-black gully. Gloomy black clouds followed in its surroundings. Countless gigantic iron crows rose and fell. They let out high-pitched cries, and their scarlet eyes made people tremble in fear. Amidst the high-pitched steam whistle, countless kobolds on the deck shouted excitedly. They stuck out their tongues and danced in ecstasy. They played all kinds of strange instruments in a mess, adding a new and strange tune to the noisy and sharp hymn. The black warship was moving forward, toward the enemy, as if it was crushing everyone's heart. Every inch forward made it harder for them to breathe. When the huge silhouette was close at hand, the city wall was dead silent. The crown wearers' gazes were cold and fearful. They suppressed their large flock, and the sound of countless blades rubbing against each other rose and fell. The harpies had already risen into the air and were cawing loudly at the crows not far away. War was about to break out. Those damn bastards, the undead, squeezed out a furious voice from the gaps of its bones. We haven't attacked them yet, and they're already here to seek death. At this moment, on the deck, Raymond felt that the scenery was boundless. He sat on the captain's throne in the middle of a large group of Hell Guards. He held his chin in his hand, and his expression was solemn. He was imposing without being angry. Behind him were top-notch assistants like Gregory and Anton. In front and left were the two great guardians like Huaishur and Forster. There was no need to say much about his imposing manner. The sour feeling in his heart made the corners of his mouth twitch uncontrollably. No, I can't laugh. Once I laugh, I'll lose my cool. Raymond, you have to calm down. You have to calm down. The good days have just begun. There's still a long way to go. Ever since he had advanced, the treatment he received had obviously changed. Recalling the bitterness and sorrow of the past, faint tears appeared in his eyes. He was so moved that he was about to cry. It's getting better. Everything's getting better. Beside him, Gregory glanced at him, crying and laughing. He lowered his voice and asked Anton, "What's wrong with your school's driver? You're crying and laughing at the same time. Did your brain get damaged from your advancement?" "It's nothing." Anton seemed to understand something. He patted Gregory's shoulder and said, "There's still a long way to go. Just let him be happy for a while." "Hey, is there a problem with your ivory tower?" Gregory was confused. In front, Forster and Huaishur's communication was much more straightforward and efficient. "What's wrong with him?" Forster asked. "It's not easy to put on airs. He's just foolishly happy now. Don't pay attention to him." Huaishur glanced at the guy who was daydreaming and almost drooling. He couldn't help but shake his head. After 2 more days, he'll wake up. Forster was suddenly speechless. He only glanced at the driver behind him, full of sympathy. Soon, as the pitch-black sun ship gradually approached, a strange figure appeared on top of the city wall. Surrounded by dark green flames, the corpse in red clothes slowly rose. The distorted and hideous skeleton looked down at the array in front of it. "People of the present realm, quickly retreat." The corpse warned in a hoarse voice. "If you want to overestimate yourself, then this will be your burial place." Below it, the large group of people in the huge settlement had already raised their weapons and were ready for battle. In a tense and oppressive atmosphere, Huaishur stood up on the ship's bow and raised his hand in front of everyone's eyes. "Brother Corpse, wait, listen to me," Huaishur said in a trembling voice. "I came today because I have a request. Can I ask everyone to help me? Help me with a small favor?" He paused for a moment and solemnly promised, "I promise that after this matter is done, the Dead Skull settlement will not only dominate the rusty pagoda forest, but also become famous in the abyss. Even the ruler will have to look at us differently." The corpse was stunned for a moment. He couldn't understand the crazy words of this person of the present realm, but for some reason, he felt the undisguised sincerity and was a little confused. Could it be that he had misjudged the purpose of this group of people of the present realm? What do you mean? Of course it's simple. Huaishur smiled and pointed to the sun ship under his feet. Brother Corpse, please take a look. This is the equipment of our Bahamut cult's new batch of 100 Eyes settlement. Unfortunately, the budget is limited, so it's still lacking a little bit. After all, Brother Five Eyes is weak and alone. It's hard to support everything. Why don't we invite everyone from the Dead Skull Settlement, Morning Mountain Settlement, and Cloud Hunter Settlement to board the ship together? When the time comes, you will be the bow of the ship, and it will be the stern. Everyone will work together sincerely and integrate into one. Together, we will traverse hell and dominate the abyss. Isn't that beautiful? For a moment, in the dead silence, everyone looked at each other. It was difficult to understand the absurdity of it. But when that strange voice echoed in their ears, they couldn't help but feel that this guy seemed to, perhaps, make some sense. Their minds wavered. Corpse, who had the highest soul resistance, was the first to react. He broke free from Huaishur's bewitchment, and the flames in his eyes burned red in anger. He roared in anger. Arrogant person, since you refuse to come to your senses, today will be the day of your burial. Corpse raised his finger, and suddenly, countless bones appeared from the void. They piled up into towering bone walls, shrouding the surroundings of the Dead Skull Settlement, turning the entire settlement into a city of bones with sharp edges and corners. Countless viscous blood seeped out from between the gaps of the white bones. The blazing blood sizzled in the air and quickly turned into a thick blood mist, covering the kobolds all over the mountains. For a moment, screams rose and fell, lingering in the ears. The blood mist was like a strong acid, and the kobolds at the front rolled on the ground. Their flesh and blood were charred, and they struggled in pain. I kindly asked you to share the hegemony with me. It's fine if you don't agree, but you even spoke ill of me and even wanted to hit me? On the bow of the ship, Huaishur shook his head helplessly, exasperated. I'm doing this for your own good. By the way, what day is it today? The second half of the sentence was directed to Forster behind him. Forster subconsciously glanced at the time on his wristwatch. Thursday. Oh, then it's fine. Huaishur stroked the white cat that had appeared out of nowhere in his arms. His fingers scratched its chin twice, causing the white cat to squint its eyes in satisfaction. It meowed. In an instant, a pure white halo enveloped the entire battlefield. Wherever it passed, countless drops of sweet dew fell like rain. Different from the code of war, the treaty of peace was in effect. Then, the screams began to quickly disappear. In the blood mist, the kobolds who were rolling and struggling on the ground actually got up again under the astonished gazes of many people. They were completely fine. It was as if everything that happened just now was just for show, as if they were afraid that the kobolds would be sad because they saw the kobolds attack. However, the large group of people with good eyesight had already seen the kobolds' figures begin to change. Under the rusty armor and thick fur, all the corroded wounds were recovering rapidly. Not only that, but strands of strange colors were also growing out from the wounds. The twisted plants took root and sprouted at a terrifying speed, taking root in the wounds and wrapping around the kobolds' limbs. They absorbed the vicious blood mist in the air and grew into pure white flowers, looking extremely holy and enchanting. The fragrance spread. A huge amount of hallucinogens and stimulants floated in the air. Countless tiny spores brought about extremely realistic illusions, turning the hell before them into a holy kingdom filled with holy light. The kobolds didn't care how strange and terrifying the parasites on their bodies were. They were still feverishly praising Bahamut's miracles and charging forward without any regard for their own safety. They carried simple ladders and climbed up the sharp walls one by one. Climbing up, their crazy, zombie-like appearance caused a large group of hell creatures to have goosebumps. However, each of them had a terrifyingly tenacious vitality. They couldn't be killed. Even if they were bombarded by giant cannons and burned to a crisp by molten fire, they would quickly regenerate, and the flowers on their bodies would bloom even more vigorously and fragrantly. Their fighting spirit also grew stronger. Such a crazy attack caused countless defenders to suck in a breath of cold air, unable to restrain the trembling in their hearts. On the deck, the respected elder held his sword and looked at the countless strange torrents that were climbing up the city walls. While he was shocked and fearful, he couldn't help but remind in a low voice, "The Dead Skull settlement has gathered 5 or 6 large groups. If you want to rely on them, I'm afraid it will be difficult to break through. Why don't we let the white-scaled guards first?" After all, they had received money and had to do something. They had to show off. Otherwise, even the respected elder wouldn't be able to stand it, let alone Huai-Shur. "There's no hurry." Huai-Shur rubbed the white cat in his arms and said calmly, "We don't need you to attack the city. After that, there will naturally be places for you to display your usefulness. Respected elder, order your subordinates to gather and follow behind us." The respected elder was stunned for a moment. Then, the enemy's city defense, it's very simple. Huai-Shur glanced at the towering wall of white bones. "Can't we just crash into it?" At that moment, the sun ship crashed into the array. Amidst the crazy laughter of the Red Dragon, a high-pitched whistle burst forth. The pitch-black warship rumbled forward. The engine didn't turn as it forcibly braved the countless molten cannons and dark rays on the city walls. In this short distance of 2 kilometers, it began to accelerate crazily. It stepped on the accelerator. It was laughing maniacally. Ever since it advanced, it had been running and being beaten up on the ground. It had been sullen until now and hadn't had the chance to truly show off. Now, it could finally appear. From the engine to the rudder, its entire dragon had already ignited. Don't talk to me about strategy and tactics, and don't talk about city walls, defense, or opponents. It's just a damn word. Crash. Now. Accompanied by the whistling hurricane, the terrifying black shadow rapidly enlarged until it covered every frightened and confused face on the city walls. Then, there was a loud noise that seemed to shake the entire world. Countless white bones rained down like a storm. Then, the stone walls crumbled and collapsed, along with countless guardians. At that moment, they were all sent flying into the sky with shrill howls before falling down and shattering into pieces by the impact of this heavy impact. When the violent tremors of the earth and the sweeping hurricane finally stopped, there were no longer any city walls in front of them. Only a large amount of collapsed bricks and stones tumbled down. Under the heavy armor of the sun ship that only had a few more scratches, there was already a devastated city defense and walls that had completely collapsed and collapsed. There was no need for a gate anymore. Under this passionate impact, Death Skull Settlement let down their last bit of defense and opened their arms to the guests. Now, in the dead silence, Huai-Shur turned around and instructed the respected elder, "You can go now." Chapter 1042. There was no need to think. Just as Huai-Shur finished speaking, the elder instinctively turned around and snatched the bugle horn from the priest's hand. She raised it high and blew it with all her might. A resounding sound that couldn't be heard by human ears burst forth from the vibration of the poison copper. It sharply reverberated in the ears of every snakeman, causing them to execute the military order from the elder without hesitation. Attack! All-out attack! In front of the collapsed city wall, a white flood swept out from both sides of the stranded sun ship. It was the snakemen chasing after the sun ship. They seized this crucial opportunity to break through the city wall and drew their swords. Just like a snake's poison, it injected into the prey's body and spread, bringing death. After giving the order, the elder tossed the horn back to the priest, indicating for him to stay here and relay his orders. He bowed to Huai-Shur, then took 2 steps back and jumped down from the bow of the ship, joining the advancing white-scale guards as he shouted, "Brother Huai-Shur! Brother Huai-Shur!" Raise the flag. Accompanied by her hoarse voice, the precious insignia bestowed by the eternal ring slowly rose from the vast expanse of whiteness. That chaotic ring, which contained mercy and cruelty, fluttered in the wind. Those huge lizard-like beasts burst forth with waves of toad-like cries as they advanced. The mobility of the undead army was completely meaningless in the siege battle and the following street battles. Now, all the cavalry had already dismounted from their mounts and spread their arms, allowing their retainers to drape the heavy armor over their bodies. They raised their halberds and large shields and gathered into formation under the elders' orders. In the chaos, the large group behind the city wall simply didn't have time to make an effective response. They even lost their original barrier and geographical advantage. At the very front were those lizards that were taller than ordinary people by half their bodies. These strange creatures raised by the snake men possessed a terrifying weight and scales that were as hard as metal. Now, after tearing down the knights, what they carried on their backs were countless sharp barbs, becoming the barrier that the white-scaled guards relied on. Under the siege and counterattack of those corpse warriors, they forcibly propped up a position in the square in front of the ship's bow. After that, there was no place for any tactics or other strange tactics to be displayed. All that was left was a scalp-numbing slaughter. At the entrance of the square, on the narrow streets, and even in the gaps where normal people couldn't even turn around, every hell creature held a weapon in their hands. Their eyes were scarlet as they attacked their enemies. There was no space to dodge or retreat. In fact, if they slowed down for even a moment, they would be trampled to death by the allies behind them. This was the simplest and most straightforward collision between flesh and blood, iron and bone, claws and teeth, and scales. It was also the crudest and cruelest way of fighting. Every minute and every second, a large number of casualties appeared. Deaths were so common that there was no need to count them. The wails were drowned out by the roars and roars of anger. Broken limbs and corpses were piled up together, covering every inch of the space that was being contested. Even with the peace treaty, there was no way to temporarily reduce the number of deaths that were happening every second. In the short period of time that countless white-scaled guards fought for with their lives, 6 giant lizards hissed in the square. They slowly and strenuously dragged a rope and erected a thick totem pole. Under the totem pole, a dozen shamans held onto it and focused on praying. They ignored the arrows that flew past their ears and their fallen comrades. At the very front, the shaman raised his sword and chopped off the heads of captives one after another. Sticky blood gathered from all directions and clung to the totem pole, glowing with a dazzling light. The blessing from the ruler, the eternal ring, descended. Under the illumination of the light, the bodies of the white-scaled guards began to rapidly swell. Their rough muscles even burst through their skin and scales, turning them into giant half-snake, half-lizard monsters. Even their weapons were tossed aside like children's toys in their hands. The sharp, bony claws and the rapidly growing teeth in their mouths were the blessings bestowed upon them by the eternal ring. They hunted for blood and died in battle. The elder had transformed from his original humanoid appearance into a complete monster. His gray robe was torn, and a snake tail that was dozens of meters long extended out and coiled around the totem pole. His long hair, which was tied together by 3 long braids, fell off, and his smooth skull protruded. His 6 newly grown arms were raised high. Amidst the shaman's praises and prayers, he scattered poisonous flames in all directions. Wherever the flames touched, everything would be burned and melted by the poisonous flames. Even the slightest contact with the flames of the bone-encrusting gangrene would be enough to engulf a person. I've said it before. The harpy roared hoarsely, her feathers trembling in anger. We shouldn't have trusted that foreign bitch. Even if these Nagas offered their blood tax and submitted to us, they would betray us sooner or later. At this point, it was useless to say such things. These foreign bastards had even moved the relics used to protect their own settlements to the battlefield. It was clear that they had steeled their hearts to follow the people of this realm and would not rest until they were dead. Right next to the blood-gushing deep well, in the secret ritual, the insect king took the lead to spread its wings and transformed into a swarm of insects that covered the sky and earth, flying towards the battlefield. Then, the monster formed from countless intertwined limbs let out a muffled sound. Those limbs rapidly shrank and overlapped, turning into an illusory door. Then, the door abruptly rolled inwards and swallowed the monster whole. Right at the edge of the city wall, above the settlement, an opening propped up by a deformed limb quickly opened. Countless slender arms stretched out from within and grabbed its son's ship below. Forster stared with wide eyes for a long time, but he still didn't see the other party's main body appear. After Five Eyes' lesson, they were all scared out of their wits by that elusive bullet. This group of fellows wouldn't show their heads, even if they were beaten to death. The deformed monster hid in the strange crevice, only extending those strange limbs to tightly wrap around Sun's ship. When the limbs contracted, it actually caused the thick armor to faintly vibrate. Not only in the air, but in all blind spots, these strange limbs would extend out. They were like the palms of a drowning person, pulling everything or people they could grab, tearing them into pieces, or pulling them into the darkness of the crevice, crushing them under the pressure of countless limbs. The first to bear the brunt was Huaishur at the very front. As if he was stunned, he didn't react at all. He was pulled and shrouded by layers of limbs. The countless eyes on the deformed arms immediately shone with ecstasy, but soon after, it felt like something was wrong, because it wasn't able to grab onto anything. Instead, it seemed like it had touched an empty space. For a moment, it actually couldn't find the end. It was as if the young man standing at the bow of the ship was just an illusion, a human-shaped gap. Behind the gap, there was an even more vast and strange space. But it couldn't see anything. There was only darkness, a darkness that even hell itself paled in comparison, one that made it involuntarily tremble. In the darkness, there was a terrifying silhouette that was slowly rising. Those limbs paused for a moment and instinctively trembled. They quickly contracted, wanting to pull out. Unfortunately, it was already too late. All the deformed limbs that reached into the darkness seemed to be pulled by something invisible. Huaishur lowered his head in a daze and looked at the small hands that were touching his chest. He was full of doubt and puzzlement. Why are you touching my ultimate? Are all the crown wearers in hell so passionate? I haven't even said anything. So how did it get to me in one step? He scratched his head, thought for a moment, and still said seriously to the deformed monster, "Thank you." Accompanied by sincere thanks, the terrifying power that came from the depths of the darkness, from the ultimate, became even more violent, pulling the deformed limbs in the opposite direction. Inward, the door leading to the furnace opened at this moment. The blazing flames of the alchemy fire filled every inch of the darkness. Inside, the ringing of steel spread, and the deformed monster's tragic roar sounded from the door in the sky. It struggled with all its might, pulled, and even wanted to cut off its own limbs. But the moment it touched the darkness had already looked at it. A ferocious smile. At this moment, the sound of metal chains rubbing against each other was heard. Metal chains extended out from the ultimate in the opposite direction, entangling those deformed limbs. They extended upwards and instantly disappeared into the sky, binding every inch of the deformed monster's body. Greetings from Great Si Ming to the crown wearer. Since you're already here, and it's New Year, and you're still a child, come to think of it, it's time, right? Just like that, a strange scene appeared on the battlefield that was beyond everyone's expectations. Behind the crack in the sky, countless limbs and mutilated bodies gathered together to form a hideous monster. It screamed in horror as it was pulled out of its hiding place by the chains inch by inch. It fell to the ground and quickly disappeared into the shadow that spread out under Huaishur's feet. The door of the ultimate opened like a greedy mouth, swallowing the crown wearer completely. Then there was no more. When the door slammed shut, everything was sealed in darkness and fire for eternity, never to be seen again. Until now, the cloud of insects created by the insect lord had just risen. In the silence, only Huaishur whistled calmly and smiled curiously. Where's the next one? The moment that pair of eyes saw it, the black cloud formed by the insect swarm actually twitched in horror. Soon, countless strange flying insects scattered in all directions, fleeing for their lives. They abandoned the Death Skull settlement and didn't even care about the punishment for violating the contract. If they gathered as one, he would be easily killed by Forster's spear. But if there were thousands of them, there was no way he could resist the terrifying attraction of the dark sanctum. Forward and backward, there was only death left. But even if everyone fought to the death, as long as I ran fast enough and hid far enough, I wouldn't have to die, right? F***CK, the rusty pagoda forest. You people are too evil. I want to go to a destroyed country. Even being the withered king's dog is better than staying here and being refined into iron ingots. The moment he made up his mind, the insect lord had already scattered. Even Hawaii sure did not react in time. Not long after, the insect lord noticed that in the sky outside the Death Skull settlement, there were countless iron crows flying. Those scarlet eyes looked down, looking at the strange, fat, and thick insects. They were full of curiosity. Can it be eaten? Is it tasty? Why don't I try it? The resentful, bloody light quietly spread between the countless wings. The predators shouted excitedly, calling for their relatives and friends, and charged toward the takeout that was delivered to their door. It was time to eat. Wait. The insect lord subconsciously shouted, I'm willing to surrender. I'm willing to. There was no time for him to finish his sentence. The hungry crows had already swallowed everything. In the endless despair, only the wails that resounded through the sky were left. Save me! Save me! In the deepest part of the Death Skull settlement, the insect lord's miserable cries kept coming, but the undead was expressionless and did not move at all, until the sound completely disappeared. As early as the moment it betrayed the alliance and fled, this damn old insect was on the undead's must-kill list. Beside him, the harpy's face had already turned pale. Holding the lightning spear in her hand, she could not help but tremble. She was clearly the insufferably arrogant ruler and crown-bearer in the past. But now she was like a hen that had been caught out of cage. What should we do? The harpy turned back to look at the undead. She was at a loss. This group of reality realm ambushers were too fierce and too outrageous. The guy who originally said that he was going to carry his sister to victory instantly gave her a 10-0. How the hell were they going to fight this match? The undead did not speak. The wisps in his eye sockets flickered and gradually wavered. Finally, he glanced at the deep well that was overflowing with blood under his feet, and his voice became hoarse. Now that things have come to this, there's nothing more to do. Let's go. Go! The harpy's eyes instantly lit up. That's right. Use this secret device to blow up the Death Skull settlement. We'll take advantage of this opportunity to charge out. They won't be able to stop us, so I'll... Bang! The moment she turned around, a deathly pale skeletal hand protruded from her chest, clenched her heart, and abruptly crushed it. Go! You bunch of trash! How much effort did I put in? How much time did I put in? How much time did I put in? How much effort did I put in? The undead stuck close to her back, his voice cold. And now, just because of a small setback, you're crying and yelling that you want to become the withered king's dogs? Instead of letting him take advantage of you, why don't you give it to me? As soon as he finished speaking, the strange undead opened his mouth, and his sharp teeth sank into the harpy's neck. He did his best to suck out her blood, origin substance, and even her soul. The harpy cried out in pain, calling out to her descendants and the large group as she struggled in vain. However, within the city, countless corpse warriors had already begun their assault, cruelly slaughtering all living creatures. Only fresh blood continued to flow, continuously gathering towards the pool of blood in the deep well. The undead feasted on the boiling pool of blood. Finally, he had absorbed enough souls. His shriveled face gradually began to fill out, and he began to regain his former appearance. His 6 eyes gazed down at the pool of blood beneath his feet. He loosened his grip. He allowed the harpy's corpse to fall into the pool of blood, becoming the last precious resource. In that instant, the secret device sealed in the deepest part of the Death Skull settlement was finally unraveled. The massive rusty tower forest began to tremble violently. Countless broken towers began to emit a cold glow that intersected with each other, tearing through the dark clouds and disappearing into the deep well of blood. In the deep well, a scarlet altar slowly rose up. A strange rock slowly wriggled on top of the altar, expanding and contracting as it emanated a boundless malice. It was like a heart. The moment it appeared, everyone within a few hundred kilometers of the Death Skull settlement felt a bone-piercing chill, making it difficult for them to breathe. Their consciousness began to waver, as if their souls were about to leave their bodies and fly towards the rock. This day has finally come. The undead laughed hoarsely as he reached out towards the altar. Now, under the nourishment of countless fresh blood, this power from the Rusty Tower Forest had completely awakened. This relic that had been slumbering in hell for tens of thousands of years, he finally belonged to him. Slap! Right next to him, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed his wrist. Like an iron clamp, an awkward silence suddenly ensued. The undead's smile stiffened on his face. He turned his head with difficulty, but all he saw was the young face from the present realm. It was as if he had caught a pickpocket who was secretly rummaging through his pockets. Huaishur asked solemnly, "You, how can you touch other people's things?" Chapter 1043. Don't belong to someone else? For a moment, in this sudden silence, after witnessing Huaishur's amazing speed after the treasure appeared, the companions on the ship were once again shocked. Even the undead were stunned in place. They couldn't understand. What are you talking about? Only the righteous light above Huaishur's head was still as awe-inspiring as before. Still want to quibble? I just walked away for a while, and I saw you trying to steal something. Steal? The undead was sluggish, his lips trembling as he looked at the strange heart of stone on the altar not far away. He only felt a burst of absurdity from the bottom of his heart. This is clearly mine. What do you know? Huaishur solemnly raised a finger. As a special military officer of the Astronomy Association, after coming to Hell, according to the second small rule of the Development Management Law, I naturally have the right to develop this Hell, the right to sign all the research results, and the right to dispose of all dangerous items. How can I let you take this thing full of hidden dangers to torment the poorer creatures of Hell? What's more, from the bottom of his heart, he regarded this group of enthusiastic Hell creatures as his good friends, generous and selfless sharing. His ship was their ship, his ultimate destination was their ultimate destination, and his achievements were their achievements. In other words, their belongings were his belongings. Wouldn't their treasures be his treasures? But now, his good friend wanted to steal his treasures while he wasn't paying attention? This is too much. Huaishur was unable to restrain his anger. I clearly trusted you so much. How can you be worthy of my good intentions? Boom! In a state of extreme anger, Huaishur swung the stone marrow building and smashed it on the undead's head. Afong made a loud noise. In an instant, countless cracks appeared on the bones of the undead, but it didn't collapse on the spot. And in the Dead Skull settlement, thousands of corpse warriors were instantly blasted into a bloody mist by the force that burst out of thin air. The moment the undead reacted, his eyes were already burning red. He roared in anger. Present realm person, you've gone too far. Huaishur didn't stop, and Afong smashed down again. Boom! The necks of the corpses were instantly broken, and half of their heads hung from their shoulders. Countless corpse warriors in the city died in an instant. His eyes spat out tangible flames of origin substance. I will kill you. Boom! Huaishur did not speak again. He pressed him to the ground and raised Afong to continue smashing him. In an instant, the corpse turned into a pile of mud, and a large amount of blood in the blood pool evaporated, causing him to let out a mournful scream. I'll fight you to the death. Boom! The earth cracked, and the remains of the dead body disappeared without a trace. Not even his bones remained. Among them, the majority of them had been bombarded by Afong. However, there was also a portion that he had abandoned on his own accord. After extracting all of his power and condensing it into a vengeful spirit, he finally broke free from Huaishur's grip and escaped. Then, he activated the final secret ritual, allowing the ultimate in the shadows to suck away most of its power Its soul flowed into the heart of rock iron on the altar through the alchemy array. Under Huaishi's suppression and ravaging, he had already sunk into a state of madness. He didn't care about the terrible price he had to pay and took the initiative to offer himself as a sacrifice to that evil thing that had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years. In an instant, the silent heart of rock iron on the altar fiercely beat once again. Thunder rumbled. The entire infernal realm seemed to tremble slightly. Immediately after, there was a tragic cry. The corpse roared angrily, as if it had fallen into a raging inferno of endless torment. In the bottomless well, the surging blood suddenly gushed out, forming a red tide. In the blink of an eye, it covered more than half of the Death Skull settlement. The suppression of superior existence descended. Suffocation. Throughout the rusty pagoda forest, countless broken pagoda collapsed rapidly. The plants withered, the birds wailed, and the snakes, insects, rats, and ants hidden under the soil struggled with difficulty, but they quickly withered into a pile of dust. It was as if all life had been taken away by that strange heart. The heart of rock iron began to come to life again. The stony color faded, and vitality reappeared. Countless tentacle-like flesh and blood tangled together and grew out of the blood. When the broken towers collapsed, what formed around the heart were strange, deformed bones. In the end, the altar shattered with a loud bang. At the cost of the complete desolation of the entire infernal realm, the fossils left behind by the past rulers after their deaths once again reappeared in their original outline. However, no matter how many sacrifices and risks there were, they couldn't recreate that terrifying majesty. At this moment, the huge humanoid body couldn't be considered complete at all. On the body that was more than 100 meters long, jagged white bones were exposed in most places, and even the bones were covered in cracks. 2 of the 4 arms had been broken at the elbow, and the last one was simply not exposed. After losing most of its internal organs and flesh, it was just an empty shell. Even its face was incomplete, and only swollen, rotten flesh covered a small part of it. However, when it raised its face, its single eye shone brightly. It was as if an eternal thunderbolt was entwined in that eye, and even if it died, it would not dissipate. The king of pygmies. The origin of that heart was actually from the ruler of the Sea of Thunder. It originated from a place covered by endless storms and thunderbolts. The place known as the Sea of Thunder was the infernal realm's ocean that covered an area of dozens of meters deep. The descendants of the giants were the well-deserved overlords of that ocean. Countless years ago, their world had already ushered in destruction and solidification. However, even after falling into infernal realm, their existence continued for countless eras until today, and they formed a colossus that was not inferior to a fallen country. They called themselves dwarfs because their current height of dozens of meters could no longer be compared to the magnificent bodies of their ancestors, who were thousands of meters tall. Even so, their strength did not weaken in the slightest. At this moment, what appeared in front of Huaishi and the others was the path of the exiles. In the Sea of Thunder, on the countless islands, if the dwarf kings who were the rulers lost in the Battle of Glory, they would lose all their power, spouses, and children. They would bear the tattoo of shame and embark on the long path of exile alone, until one day they would return and take revenge on the enemy who had taken everything away from them, or they would silently die in some distant infernal realm. Perhaps thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, a certain dwarf king riddled with scars would come to this desolate infernal realm and welcome his own end. He would silently die from a curse, an old wound, or the pursuit of the victors. The giant corpse fell, and the disaster transformed. Countless bones formed a giant tower that reached into the sky. The entire rusty pagoda forest had grown out of its corpse. Now, when the ironstone heart that had been dormant for tens of thousands of years beat again, violent origin substance fluctuations surged from the rotten and broken body. All of you will die. The corpse's deranged consciousness flowed out from its remaining eye. When it sensed its powerful strength and unprecedented weakness, it immediately became even more berserk. According to its original plan, after sacrificing all the crowns, it should be able to transform into a true ruler. Even the weakest ruler would still be a ruler. But now, it only had a single harpy as a sacrifice. Even if it sacrificed an entire settlement, it would only be able to bring back this kind of thing. It was still in the same place. And the sacrifices it had prepared, from the five-eyed monster to the insect king, had all been swallowed by the other side. Gone. Hundreds of years of planning had been destroyed along with all of its resources. Now, the corpse had already sunk into complete madness. He raised his remaining thick right arm and slammed it beneath his feet, crushing the countless kobolds and white-scaled guards around him into dust. Immediately afterwards, the rotten face looked up. Light shot out from its single eye. The ironstone heart madly beat, extracting the life force from the entire rusty tower forest, causing that single eye to shine with a terrifying light that surpassed the sun. Even if he was extremely furious at this moment, Undead Corpse still maintained a precious trace of calmness in his heart. Even if he was no longer the same as before, if he squandered this hard-earned strength, then there was still the possibility of defeat. It had to immediately cause irreparable damage to the other side before they could react. Only then would it be possible to completely grasp victory. It had to attack the other side's weakness, heavily injure the other side. In other words, to catch bandits, first catch the king. Under the gaze of that single eye, the entire infernal realm was in its eyes. Not a single trace could escape its eyes, including all of Huaishi's changes. But at this moment, it didn't put Huaishir in its eyes at all. A lousy pawn that charged and broke through the enemy lines. Even if it was powerful, it was just a tool of a true powerhouse. And Forster, who was holding a shotgun and aiming vigilantly from afar, was just an assassin that couldn't be put on the stage. The real leader of that group of people, the real important existence among them, had already been discovered by him. That leader who had never shown himself since coming to the Rusty Tower Forest and had always been hiding behind the scenes, plotting all of this. Even after the war had begun, the person who sat on his throne, surrounded by his subordinates, coldly looked down on all of this from the perspective of the present realm. There was only one truth. The ferocious single eye suddenly turned and aimed its son's ship, locking onto the opponent who thought he was safe and even sneered in disdain. Die! At that moment, on the captain's throne, Raymond's smile froze on his face. Lifeless. Countless lightning bolts turned into a flood, and with a loud boom, the disaster brewed from the endless dark clouds and the sea of lightning descended. Endless lightning bolts gushed out from the corpse's single eye. The entire world turned dark in an instant. Everything that stood in the way of the lightning was completely vaporized. The heat from the aftershock spread, melting and dissipating countless ruins and kobolds, turning them into putrid green smoke. Everywhere it passed, everything welcomed destruction. This was the Dwarf King's fury, the genuine fury of lightning. Raymond, on the other hand, only had time to let out a terrified scream. Glittering tears rushed out from the corners of his eyes, and at that moment, grief, indignation, and bewilderment instinctively flowed out from his soul. F***CK, why is it me? The next moment, the secret device Gregory had propped up dissipated like a bubble. Then, Sunship fell apart, the steel melted, and was completely scrapped. After abandoning the physical clone, Sunship, which had entered the Styx mode, flashed from afar, and there was already a terrible burn mark on the ship's body. The outermost armor had melted under the bombardment of the lightning, and molten iron flowed out. After brushing past death, the main body was still intact. Only the sails were slightly damaged, but there weren't any major problems. But before Raymond could heave a sigh of relief, he saw the pillar of lightning shooting out from the corpses, chasing after him. It cut through the earth, stirring up the rock strata, and after leaving behind a deep scar in the rusty pagoda forest, it swept towards Sunship. Want to run? Dream on. The corpse roared, and the lightning bolts locked onto Sunship's existence, chasing after it closely. Not only did Sunship's appearance not dispel his suspicions, it instead made him more and more certain that the person under such heavy protection was the most important person. Ignoring Huaishur, who was right in front of him, he had to kill that damned bastard. He had to let him experience the consequences of his actions. At that moment, Sunship was moving at full speed, overloaded, and constantly drifting, rapidly changing directions, and dodging the lightning bolts that were like maggots attached to the bones. Motherf asterisk her why. Raymond was on the verge of tears as he swung the wheel. It's that bastard Huaishur who is messing with you. Why do you have to harm me, an innocent driver? Only Huaishur couldn't help but roll his eyes. Who told you to only care about showing off? Don't talk about the corpse. Even if it was me, I would do the same to you. Maintain the speed. While escaping, Gregory reminded, there's no need to fight it head-on. The origin substance in his body is rapidly decreasing, and the Pygmy King's calamity is constantly dispersing. Very soon, he will fall to the level of an ordinary crown wearer. At that time, we can slowly talk about it. Even so, we should still be able to run away. Raymond firmly stepped on the overloaded pedal, not relaxing, and used all his strength to twist the wheel to the bottom, narrowly brushing past the pursuit of the lightning bolt. However, there was no way to continue maintaining the speed. It was an imminent danger. At that moment, the lightning bolt that brushed past them strangely changed its direction, losing its target. Instead, it twisted upwards, cutting through the dark clouds in the sky, and finally disappeared into the endless abyss. Did it miss? Immediately after, a loud cracking sound spread out. When Raymond turned around, he saw the angrily struggling, incomplete giant, and the chains wrapped around his body. Just now, the sorrowful rope in Huaishur's hand had extended to a length of tens of thousands of meters, wrapping around the corpse's legs, limbs, head, and even neck, quickly contracting. Ridiculous! The corpse laughed mockingly. He was anxious. He was anxious. The strength of a human was simply unable to contend against the strength of a giant, and it wasn't even enough to shake its enormous weight. It was just a futile effort. He spread out his arms, and just as he was about to break the chains in his hands, he saw Huaishur take a step back and throw Ah Fong to the ground. The earth trembled and wailed. A terrifying mass comparable to the entire stone marrow building was nailed into the rusty earth of the pagoda forest. The instant Huaishur's right hand swept across the long mace, a metallic light condensed and turned into a giant capstan. The sorrowful rope pierced through the air, wrapping around the mace. In the blink of an eye, a complicated pulley was completed. When Huaishur flicked his finger, the flames of the angry axe reignited from the depths of hell. The enormous origin substance incarnation descended, pulling at the chains and brazenly smashing through the ruins in front of him. After tearing through the layers of obstacles, it madly rushed off into the distance. The sorrowful rope tightened, and the capstan spun rapidly. Accompanied by an ear-piercing grinding sound, countless sparks shot out. The corpse's movements came to an abrupt halt, and its twisted neck stiffened in place. Immediately after, under the simple miracle of physics, a crisp sound burst forth. Crack! The low sound of bones disconnecting spread out, and the lightning bolt disappeared without a trace. The corpse's vision went black, and it staggered back a step. Immediately after, there was a loud crash as it fell to the ground. Under the rotation of the capstan and the binding of the sorrowful rope, it actually knelt on the ground, its head pressed against the ground in humiliation, unable to lift up. It was as if it was facing a god. It was bowing down in worship to the man in front of it. Don't stand so high. I don't like looking up at people. Huaishur raised his hand and patted its face as if praising it. Look, you're much more pleasing to the eye now. Chapter 1044. There was no disdain or mockery in his tone. It was as if he was just describing something that was not worth mentioning. But in this sudden silence, countless scarlet veins quickly appeared in the corpse's single eye, and his violent anger could not be controlled. The remaining arrogance in the heart of rock and the pygmy king's anger instantly swallowed up the corpse's last bit of rationality, causing him to fall into a state of madness amidst this unprecedented humiliation. "You damn maggot!" The corpse roared, and the rope of sorrow tightened. The pulley and capstan made a loud noise that was difficult to bear. In the midst of the bursting sparks, the figure of anger that was galloping in the distance suddenly stopped. The sound of steel breaking could be heard. The capstan that was fixed on Ah Fong shattered with a loud bang, and countless fragments flew everywhere. The pygmy king's body finally broke free from the shackles of the chains and climbed up from the ground. He raised his hand that was covered in the color of rock and slammed it down on Huai Shi. A loud bang burst forth. The earth reacted like a wave, instantly sweeping through the entire settlement, and countless dust clouds flew into the air. Huai Shi's figure disappeared without a trace in that instant. Then he reappeared from shadow burial, still in the same place. He raised a foot and stomped on the pygmy king's hand that was embedded in the rock. And in the space between Huai Shi's 5 fingers, Ah Fong fell. Ah Fong, who had been injected with all of Great Si Ming's origin form, once again appeared with all of his body's mass. In an instant, he tore apart the swollen and rotten flesh and nailed the giant hand to the ground like a nail. The corpse roared in pain, and his other hand smashed down like a hammer, violently sweeping across, instantly overturning more than half of the settlement's wreckage. He had completely fallen into a state of madness. "There's no need to fight head-on with him now," the sacred beetle on Huai Shi's shoulder asked doubtfully. "Isn't it better to fly a kite?" The connection of origin form transmitted Osiris's observations to Huai Shi's eyes. Countless numbers circled around the massive body, marking out every part of it that required attention. Height, weight, power output, origin substance fluctuations, attack warnings, even the flames that burned vigorously like a furnace in his body. It was the crystal of disaster that was once formed by the Dwarf King, the power that burst forth from the stony iron heart. But now, even with the naked eye, one could see that the power was rapidly weakening and dissipating, just like alcohol evaporating. In less than 2 hours, the undead would return to their original form, or even fall into an even weaker state. There was no need to wrestle and fight with him. That's true. But when the time comes, we won't be able to gain anything, right? Huai Shi waved her sword in the face of the hurricane, tearing it apart. When the time comes, only the wearer of the crown will be left. The freshest ingredients should be processed in the fastest way. Huai Shi stepped on the ruins and rolled up his sleeves. Besides, it's just for show. No matter how strong it is, it can't be stronger than that shameful rotten dream, right? The pygmy king looked like he was looking at a dead piece of pork on the chopping board. The pygmy king's anger burst forth once again, turning into tangible lightning that wrapped around the huge body, forming a majestic armor. The world darkened once again. Countless snake-like lightning continuously shot out from the pygmy king's body, destroying everything in front of him once again. The hurricane quickly retracted in the pygmy king's right hand. The disaster turned into a weapon and slashed down at the ground. Die! Everything in front of the Tempest Sword was cleanly torn apart into dust by the hurricane and vacuum. The origin substance within the Tempest caused everything to rapidly corrode and peel off. That was definitely not a simple hurricane. Instead, it was the reappearance of the eternal disaster in the Sea of Lightning. However, compared to the destructive power of the real thing recorded in the present world, this kind of thing that only looked good on the outside was really pitifully weak. Huai Shi sighed. Amidst the undead's roar, his figure suddenly appeared on the pygmy king's arm. The bloody light of hatred multiplied in his hand and scattered out. The blade extended from the slash, instantly slicing through the undead's neck. Lightning and rocks were torn apart by the blade. Rotten blood spurted out from the wound, but it was not enough to cut through the undead's head. It only left a cut mark on the undead's hard bones. The undead roared. It raised its other broken arm and pressed it towards Huai Shi. Immediately afterwards, however, that figure strangely disappeared into the shadows. The blood-red blade fell from the sky and scattered into countless pitch-black crows. When the crows gathered again, he had already appeared behind the undead. The axe of wrath swept out. The origin substance incarnation galloped over. The blazing bull carried the momentum accumulated over a long distance and the flames of wrath. It crashed into the pygmy king's leg, causing him to fall to the ground. Immediately afterwards, the white deer's phantom appeared in the air. It disappeared in a flash. It had already sliced through the undead's chest, leaving behind a deep wound. Blood spurted out like a waterfall. However, when the undead angrily turned around, wanting to chop that damn thing to pieces, it saw Huai Shi standing there, as well as the sword that had appeared in his hand. Brilliant flames brewed on the blade of the sword, bursting forth and soaring into the sky. They turned into a flood that collided with the storm. It tore through the storm like a hot knife through butter, slicing through the lightning and smashing it downwards. It left behind a straight cut from the top of the undead's head to the bottom of the undead's feet. It almost instantly split the undead in half. The undead froze in place. It trembled. It felt the judgment contained within that intense light that targeted all disasters. For a moment, even it thought that it had been destroyed by that sword. However, it soon discovered that it was still whole. The only things that had been torn apart were its regenerated flesh and internal organs. The bones that had been passed down from the pygmy king were not damaged at all. No matter how sharp the sword was, it could not damage the bones that had been forged from lightning and the sea. It could only leave behind a shallow mark. It's useless. It stared in surprise at its bare skeletal hands and complete body. It let out a hoarse laugh. "Ha, it's useless, it's useless." It laughed savagely as it slashed a Huai Shi again. "You're not injured at all." Boom! In an instant, Huai Shi appeared in front of it, right in front of it. The heavy iron hammer in his hand spat out flames as it smashed down. An incomparable origin substance attack instantly erupted from the undead's soul. It caused the undead's vision to go black. It staggered backwards. It actually fell to the ground once again. What was that damn thing? Bang! The sound of metal rang out from Huai Shi's hand. "Right, I forgot to ask." Huai Shi stepped forward and asked curiously, "Between pain and regret, which do you prefer? Or do you want both?" The outlines of the iron hammer and the long truncheon slowly appeared in his hand, and the metallic light grew stronger. The hammer of pain burned with bloody flames, and the head of Bahamut's malevolent malice. On top of Afong's truncheon, the sound of waves surged, and the illusory image of a Kuanpung appeared amidst the water vapor and rainbow light. In the instant it appeared, a new storm was stirred up amidst the countless remnants of hell. It was just like a whirlpool. A new tide was stirred up. In that instant, the shadow beneath Huai Shi's feet danced and rose up like a surging wave. It rose up, expanded, and enveloped the undead's face. It covered despair. In an instant, the thick water vapor turned into a white fog. Amidst the mighty whale's song, the attacks from the stone marrow hull once again descended upon the undead's body. Continuous loud noises burst out like thunder. After overlapping in one place, it formed a mighty melody. Mastery symphony. Under the ravaging of both origin substance and matter, the sound of cracking could be heard from the pygmy king's body. The undead screamed in terror, subconsciously trying to protect its face. However, it was unable to block the attacks that continuously descended upon its body. Its pale white bones trembled violently, and fine cracks actually began to appear. "Wait, He wanted to speak, but what appeared before his eyes was only a pair of cold eyes and the truncheon that was smashing down. Under the assault of the violent storm, the skeleton hummed like iron. Immediately after, there was a scalp-numbing sound of breaking. Using the omnipresent water vapor as a medium, Huai Shi's power accurately penetrated the pygmy king's body, separating the connective tissues and bones from each other, completely peeling off those rotten and festering tissues. Immediately after, the joints between each bone exploded. First, it was the legs. Next, it was the legs and then the two spines, as well as the connecting cartilage in the middle, as well as the four spasming arms. It was as if he was destroying a marionette, using pain to suppress the resistance of the soul, and then using regret to destroy the defense of the skeleton. The entire opponent was turned into a pile of mush. When the thick fog dissipated from the storm, only the sound of collapse could be heard. The giant fell to the ground once again. From head to toe, every bone in its body had been completely detached, and it could not move at all. Only viscous blood continuously seeped out from its wounds, scarlet filling the air. It was already on the verge of death. Its solidified soul was already on the verge of collapse. Under the torment of pain, it struggled to make vague sounds, constantly saying something, begging for mercy, but it could not be heard clearly. In front of the giant, in the ruins, Huaisher raised his arm to wipe the sweat on his face and looked at him. He told him, "Now you can speak." The skeleton was stunned for a long time, as if it finally understood what had happened, and its expression immediately became excited. It did its best to squirm on the ground, moving over little by little. There was no trace of the rage and stubbornness from before, and it was full of taming and desire. "Spare me, spare me." He gasped for breath with difficulty, and from the gaps of his teeth, he begged vaguely. "It's all my fault, all my fault. I'm sorry, I'm so audacious. I'm so ungrateful. I shouldn't have stolen your things. Spare me, spare me. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything." Huaisher seemed to be stunned, and scratched his head in confusion. "My things? Yes, yes, yes. Yours. It's all yours." The skeleton tried hard to nod, but could not move, but an unprecedented sincere expression appeared on its rotten face, full of remorse and self-blame. "I overestimated myself, did not know the heavens and reason, and dared to offend you. That's why I ended up like this. Please be merciful. I'm willing to sign a slave contract and serve you for eternity." There was no dignity, not even the slightest hesitation. The moment he was sure of his defeat, the skeleton chose to surrender. Even if he was humiliated, it did not matter, as long as he could continue to exist. This, Huaisher could not bear it. "Isn't this too unfair for you? What are you saying?" The skeleton opened its single eye wide, full of flattery. "It's my honor to be your dog. I'm the only one who doesn't deserve you. How is this unfair? Yes, I still have treasures. I still have a treasury. It's just below here. The key to activate it is in the stone tablet in the center of the settlement. There's also the treasury of 5 eyes. I know where it is." As if he was afraid that Huaisher would not be willing to listen, he ignored his coughing and serious injuries, and quickly spat out a series of locations and activation methods from his mouth. He did not even have any thoughts of using it as a bargaining chip. He was afraid that he would doubt his sincerity. After Huaisher heard this, his eyes moved slightly, and then he felt a little regretful. "But our Astronomy Association is a human rights organization. We are not allowed to take in slaves. Then I'll join the Astronomy Association. I'll join. I'll join." The skeleton seemed to understand something. He was overjoyed and said excitedly, "I've heard that organizations in the modern realm like to find cannon fodder and periphery in hell, right? No matter how lowly the position is, there's no problem. Please let me serve you." For a moment, even the people on the sun ship in the distance looked at each other. This was the first time they saw a group leader in hell crying and shouting, wanting to be a slave for the Astronomy Association. Did they make a mistake somewhere? "Okay," Huaisher sighed. "Since you've said so, I can't refuse you. But are you sure? The rules and regulations of the Astronomy Association are very strict." I'm sure. The skeleton wriggled forward and shouted with all his might, "I must have been born to be a dog for the Astronomy Association. Being a dog for the Astronomy Association is the meaning of my existence. If I can't be a dog for the Astronomy Association, then what's the point of my life?" In the long silence, under Huaisher's scrutiny, the skeleton showed a fanatical and flattering look. He did not dare to resist in the slightest, allowing the blood to flow, and did not even dare to stop the bleeding. He only trembled. He pleaded for mercy and mercy from the judge. In the end, Huaisher nodded slowly. Very well. Since you have understood reason and shame, and want to redeem your mistakes, then I can give you a chance. He put his palm into his pocket. The skeleton continued to suffocate, staring blankly, for fear that he would pull out a weapon. But when Huaisher raised his hand, there was only a certificate in his hand. Thorns and sharp blades surrounded the emblem of the modern realm. A certificate from the Astronomy Association. Just like that, it was placed in front of him. From today onwards, you are a member of the Astronomy Association, Mr. Skeleton, Huaisher said. Cheer for this. You have won a precious redemption. Yes, that's right. Redemption. Redemption. The skeleton almost cried tears of joy, leaving scarlet tears. Your great kindness, I will engrave it in my heart. I will definitely. Next, as your introducer, I will teach you your first lesson as a member of the Astronomy Association. Huaisher interrupted him and told him calmly, I hope you can learn and listen seriously. Definitely. I will definitely remember it in my heart. The skeleton shouted excitedly. Please tell me. I will definitely remember it in my soul. I will study it in depth every day. I will not dare to slack off. There's no need to be so exaggerated. Huaisher waved his hand a little embarrassedly and smiled. As long as you practice it, it will be fine. At that moment, a clear sound rang out. It broke. In the skeleton's sluggish eyes, Huaisher's arm had already sunk into his chest, clenching something faintly beating in it. Clenching. You must remember it well. Huaisher solemnly instructed. The first lesson as a member of the Astronomy Association. That was, sacrifice your heart for the modern realm. At that moment, a torrent of shadowy origin substance emerged from the skeleton's body, erupted, and swallowed everything. Amidst the wails of the skeleton, the door to the ultimate slowly opened. Countless shadows were like hands, pulling the wailing skeleton of the giant, dragging it bit by bit into eternal darkness. The mournful screams came to an abrupt end. There was nothing left in the ruins. Only Huaisher looked down at the strange stone heart that was still beating vigorously in his hand. He nodded in satisfaction. Finally, he praised. It seems that you have done it. Chapter 1045. Pitch black smoke rose into the sky. After countless towers broke, the rusty tower forest where the dark clouds had dispersed did not receive a clear sky. Instead, it was shrouded in an even thicker darkness. Scorching hot wind mixed with a pungent smell blew in the sky, rolling up thick smoke and spreading in all directions. The original Skull Settlement had already turned into a piece of scorched earth. Now, on the scorched earth, a huge furnace was releasing rolling heat, like a pitch-black monster crawling on the ground. The terrifying fire had burned for 2 days and nights. Countless steel birds hovered in the air, rising and falling in flocks. They pulled ropes and threw truckloads of materials into the furnace. In the factory made of huge machinery, roars continuously sounded. The kobolds wearing gas masks were already black from the smoke. They moved in the thick smoke, moving carts of iron ingots that had not yet cooled down from the assembly line and sending them to the processing equipment at the other end. Then, the equipment at the other end spat out the finished products and sent them to the next processing window along the conveyor belt of the assembly line. Smelting, forging, stamping, welding. Those huge and crude ancient models had long been eliminated in the modern realm. Now, they were put to use again in hell. At the end of the assembly line, hundreds of cyborgs were urgently busy. They followed Beelzebub's instructions and hurriedly assembled the large equipment. These cyborgs with goat horns and bleeding were all Gregory's reserve tools. Using the miracle of the golden fleece and the dragon-tooth soldier to smelt, they had a considerable degree of adaptability. Their names were written on scrolls made of wool and gold thread and transcribed with ashes. They were given a secret ritual during the process of their birth. The bodies of morning and evening were just their carriers. After years of use and maintenance, they already had the knowledge and ability to operate alchemy instruments and perform precise operations. Now, under their operation, the originally mighty and ferocious sun ship was beyond recognition. It was disassembled again. The outer armor that had been welded was completely dismantled and then melted back into the furnace for reconstruction and maintenance. The hull was also disassembled under the large hoisting equipment. It was like a whale being dissected. All the buildings on the ship were dismantled. The hull was cut open. The deck was overturned. The ship frame was reorganized, and all the equipment and instruments were placed around the ship. Many different cabin structures welcomed a new round of adjustments. All the main frames, transmission layers, propulsion structures, auxiliary machines, and other equipment were exposed. "This is too much, sob, sob, sob. This is too much." Raymond wiped his tears at the side. "Sun ship, my sun ship. All right, that's enough." The Red Dragon's avatar was right next to him. It glanced at him from the corner of its eyes. "Free modifications and upgrades. I didn't even cry, so why are you crying? At worst, we could just change it back later. That's what I'm crying about." Raymond wiped away his snot and tears, feeling even sadder. "Think about it. I still have to change it when I go back. How many King loans do I have to pay off? I might even have to be a tool for another 90 years. The thought of having to live another 90 years of a life where people would shoot you with cannons just because you were sitting in a chair was enough to dishearten him." At this moment, along with the high-pitched alarm of the crane, a huge shadow slowly swept across the sky. A huge dragon skeleton covered in iron light slowly descended from the sky under the pull of steel cables, causing a low rumble. That was the skeleton of the Dwarf King. It was a solid material that even the ultimate in alchemy fires could not handle. It was a precious material that had an extremely strong conductivity against all disasters and miracles. The temporary furnace did not have the temperature to completely smelt them, but this did not prevent them from being reused after modification. This was especially true after Huaishur had perfectly disassembled all of the bones. After the continuous reconstruction by Anton and Gregory these days, the skeleton was pieced back together with the recast iron. The interior was inscribed with alchemy arrays as conduction, and then covered with 6 layers of different alloys as protection. What was finally formed was the brand new keel of Sun Ship. Other than this, some of the nerves and blood vessels were also preserved under Gregory's suggestion. After being processed by alchemy, this part of the material replaced the original composite cables, reducing their need for high-precision chips and instruments. The conduction efficiency was even better than before. After all, it was the former Dwarf King. Even though he had been reborn and had been demoted from his position as the ruler, his corpse still contained many amazing effects. His entire body is a treasure. Forster looked at the position of the furnace and sighed. It has been burning for 2 days, and it can still produce continuously. Isn't it a little too resistant to burning? After all, it is the skeleton of the ruler, plus the 4 crown wearers, and most of the life force of the rusty pagoda forest. It is not strange. Gregory smacked his lips, only to feel that his mouth was full of the taste of lemon. It was too sour. Who asked him to not only have good materials, but also good tools? With the pure medium of Saint Germain's alchemy fire and the secret apparatus of Helios, even a stone could be squeezed out of oil. Such a good thing. Even a great master would be jealous. In the end, Huaishur only used it to make steel, make explosives, and make red bottles. He was so angry that he was about to die. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about tutoring Huaishur, but he hadn't expected that Huaishur's foundation would be so strange. As soon as he left the field of metalworking and origin substances, it was as if he didn't have any talent in other areas at all, and he had relied on his sealing hand and artificing technique to push himself up to this level. He was so biased in these 2 areas that he couldn't even begin to imagine. Just the high-level basic applications of metamorphic chemistry was enough for Gregory to get to the point of cerebral hemorrhage. In the end, he also gave up. This kind of thing really couldn't be forced. Just as the 2 of them were chatting, a roaring sound could be heard in the distance, and a scorching wind once again rose. In the stinky wind, the thick smoke in the sky stirred, combining with the water vapor and sprinkling down a grayish-black rain. When it fell to the ground, it flowed thickly. It was like asphalt, hissing and sizzling. Under the huge curtain, Foster smoked as he looked at the billowing smoke and flames behind the curtain of rain. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh as he thought about everything that they had personally created. A man-made hell and a natural hell. When these two things are placed together, it's almost impossible to tell which is more hellish. They're both hells. There's no difference. Gregory thought for a moment, then replied, "However, we can at least choose one of them. Curry-flavored dog poop and dog shit-flavored curry. There's not much to choose from." Forster leaned against the recliner and covered his face with his hat. "I'm going to sleep for a while. Remember to wake me up for dinner, right? What are we having for dinner?" In the silence, the sound of snoring came from under the hat. In the darkness, Huisher stood in a hot and humid greenhouse. Under the evergreen settlement, the four walls were inlaid with gray, scale-like bricks. They overlapped with each other, as if this place was already surrounded and enveloped by a giant snake. On the bricks, there were murals from the abyss describing the endless wars, the existence of the eternal ring, the merciful and cruel mother of nature, and the great achievements of countless serpent people warriors. The temperature was too humid and hot for humans, but for the serpent people, it was quite comfortable and pleasant. Standing in it, one could vaguely hear the sound of countless eggs on the ground around them. Under the command of the shamans, the pregnant serpent people also stood quietly outside with their babies in their arms, not making any sound. "According to your request, everything is ready, Sir Huisher," the elder respectfully reported. "If you have any other needs, you can let me know at any time." "No need, this is enough." Huisher looked around and did not ask for any more auxiliary mystic instruments or tributes. Originally, there should be more blood and offerings here, praying to the eternal ring and asking it to bestow a blessing to strengthen the vitality of the young serpent people. However, the blessing of the young arbiter of fate did not need to be so troublesome. As long as Huisher was present, it would be enough. It did not even conflict with the serpent people's transformation ritual, and could even be superimposed. Moreover, he still had the divine mark, Heaven's Inquisition, in his hands. Although he could not use it completely, as a medium for the mystic instrument, there was nothing more suitable for the young arbiter of fate's divinity. The only requirement was darkness. Pure darkness. Not a single ray of light. Only in this way could the shadow origin substance circulate smoothly. When Huisher pulled out the jade crown, the void of end automatically activated, covering the entire greenhouse. All of the light was extinguished, but unexpectedly, the darkness did not give off a sense of terror. Instead, it gave off a sense of tranquility and serenity. They couldn't help but relax. Even the elder subconsciously yawned, feeling a wave of drowsiness wash over him. He woke up with a start, only to discover that the serpent people around him had all lowered their eyes at some point. They had all fallen into a light sleep. Huisher slowly walked through the darkness. He took a deep breath, clasped his hands together, and struck the first note. In that moment, the ritual had already begun. Within the darkness, the echoes continued to echo. The continuous sound overlapped with each other, forming a gradually fading rhythm. When Huisher struck the drum a second time, a new wave of energy was poured into the rhythm, causing the dissipating echoes to resonate once more. The faint, low sounds overlapped with each other. In the end, they formed a dreamlike sound, as if an invisible spirit was playing a melody. Amidst the sound of the drum and flute, a distant, indistinct humming began to spread. Within the darkness, Huisher closed his eyes. He began to sing along with the melody. "Autumn orchids are willowy, flowers are growing in the hall, green leaves are pure and fragrant. My wife has a beautiful child, why does she worry?" Autumn orchids and thin leaves filled the courtyard, the green leaves interspersed with pure white flowers, their fragrance lingering in the air. "My wife is pregnant, why does she worry?" Huisher was singing the young arbiter of fate's chapter from the 9 songs. As the song echoed, he could sense the divinity in his soul begin to move on its own. and it began to show signs of splitting. However, this was not a collapse, but rather a natural phenomenon. It had split in two. After it broke free from his control, it began to move in the darkness, as if it was gathering into a graceful and noble silhouette. Immediately after, when countless miraculous light spots sprinkled down like rain, a low and mellow singing voice rang out from the operation of the divinity, matching Huai Shi's singing voice. It was as if the real young arbiter of fate had descended. Autumn orchids are green. Green leaves are purple stems. The hall is full of beauties, but suddenly I am the only one. Using orchids to refer to children and descendants, it was as if the deceased god had cast a gentle gaze from the distant past to the present, giving his blessings. Under the gaze of the distant gaze, everything was bestowed with the blessings of the young arbiter of fate, the joy of meeting and the sorrow of parting. The divinities of the great arbiter of fate and the young arbiter of fate resonated with each other, showering mercy to hell. After a long time, when the lingering sound of the song had dissipated, the tranquil darkness had also gradually dissipated. Under the faint illumination of the light, all the recipients in the greenhouse realized that the corners of their eyes were wet. They could not help but shed tears. The sound of eggshells cracking could be heard, and more hatchlings broke out of their shells. They lifted their wet noses and sniffed the hot and humid air. There was also the fragrance of the orchids that was gradually dissipating. The sound of chirping was fragmented. It was full of vitality. Chapter 1046. The elder paced back and forth in the greenhouse, holding up the swaddled infant. He discovered that the faint grayish-black color had all faded away, turning into a pure white. Under the blessing of the young master of life, the impure origin substance was purified again after being cleansed by the secret ritual. Even some of the young Nagas that had been slightly deformed had returned to normal. Huai Shi himself felt refreshed. The pressure brought on by the continuous battles and the damage to his soul had also disappeared. He had gained a new understanding of his control over divinity. He was ashamed to say this, but this was the first time he had used a blessing ceremony that was common to the young master of life. It was even close to becoming an industry. He had never experienced anything like this before. But when he came back to his senses, he couldn't help but think. If the young master of life's blessing was the same as baptism, then did this mean that he had become the godfather of a few hundred Nagas? In other words, the moment these Nagas were born, they would be considered as non-believers of the Bahamut cult. In his daze, his hand subconsciously trembled, as if he felt a gaze of approval from the abyss. It was so meaningful. Then, a green light flashed above his head. The fleeting light condensed into the shadow of a scale, then disappeared again. What was that? Huai Shi raised his head in shock. Before he could see clearly, he heard the sound of kneeling and kowtowing. The greenhouse was dead silent. The Nagas were all prostrated on the ground, piously worshipping. Huai Shi almost jumped in fright. What's going on? It's a blessing. Your Excellency, Huai Shi. The elder kowtowed in ecstasy, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets as he stared at Huai Shi. You have received the favor of the merciful mother of cruelty. The ring of eternity has specially blessed you. Verdant symbol. It was a symbol of nobility among the Nagas, equivalent to the eternal ring's crown bearers. Unless one was the chief of a large settlement, or a warrior who had experienced tens of thousands of battles, it was extremely difficult to receive the favor of a ruler. Then why was it suddenly given to him? Huai Shi scratched his head. He only understood half of it. After pondering for a long time, she suddenly realized that she had been given an award for being a midwifery expert in the production team. Was that why the team had given her a certificate of merit? Was this even possible? But since the certificate had already been given, it would be embarrassing for him to reject it. It was an honorary title, and it was better than nothing. Moreover, with this employment fee, he could even get a discount. This was very good. Huai Shi left the underground greenhouse after assisting the elders in blessing and praying for the newly born Nagas. On the street outside the gate, huge lizards were growling in a low voice. Boxes and packages of various sizes were hanging on their bodies. In the settlement, everyone was hurrying to pack their things. A noisy convoy was gradually taking shape. After the transformation ritual and the blessing of the young arbiter of life, the evergreen settlement was about to embark on the long journey of migration. Under the protection of the female serpent men, all the hatchlings and young serpent men were carefully escorted to the rear of the convoy. Huaisher's blessing had greatly reduced the pressure on their migration. After all, compared to hatchlings, eggs that had not yet hatched were the most fragile. Perhaps they would die prematurely under the bumpy journey and the drastic temperature difference. The first convoy to explore the path had already set off yesterday. In addition to the serpent men hired by Huaisher, the next large group would also set off in the next few days. They're leaving already? Huaisher looked at the flying dust. That's fast. In a few months, the tax collectors and legions of the fallen country will arrive. The elders said, "It will be difficult for us to bear the harsh blood tax alone." Since it was called blood tax, it was not something as gentle and bright as blood donation. Every once in a while, the legions from the fallen country would periodically sweep and patrol the areas within their reach. Depending on the situation and location, the cycle was uncertain. It could be 100 years, 10 years, or a few months. The settlements they passed only had two choices. They could either respectfully submit and pay taxes, or they could overestimate themselves and face destruction. Unless it was a harsh area that was difficult to survive, it would be difficult to escape. But even in hell, it was considered a harsh place, so there must be some terrifying thing or remnant of a disaster entrenched there. If they wanted to survive, they could only submit to the stronger ones. It was not just the withered king. The other larger and more powerful rulers also had their own territories and regular taxes. The Sea of Thunder needed a large number of slaves to work endlessly for them. The Dragon of Decay would regularly collect aberrations. The Land of Bliss was even more direct. Wherever they passed, not a single blade of grass would grow. Everything was used to satisfy the hunger of the eternal God. In comparison, the withered king was already considered a rare benevolence. He only wanted blood. More accurately, he wanted life. He wanted to offer his life to the country that represented death. Wherever the legions of the fallen country went, the calculating tax collectors would set a fixed standard for continuous collection based on the local situation. The best treatment was that they would only collect 3 out of 10 taxes. Apart from this, the most common method was to give away half of their lives. They could either join the withered king's army and offer their lives to the fallen country, forever serving it, or they could offer up blood and origin substances that represented their lives in order to satisfy the demands of the fallen country. Depending on the quality and quantity of blood offered, the lowest quality blood would be given, like the kobolds and rat men, and the tax rate was also the heaviest. Almost every time they came, they would lose their lives. They were born quickly and collected quickly as well. They were like leaks from hell. Even the desolate, rusty pagoda forest, which was located at the edge of the Abyss's territory, couldn't escape the taxes of the fallen country. The taxes here were constant, and they needed to offer up the same amount of blood. When the fallen country's army arrived, they either had to pay the same amount of blood tax, or they had to take one of the wearers with them. There would be no exceptions. If they couldn't pay up, it wasn't uncommon for the entire hell to be slaughtered. At this point, it wasn't just the Nagas that were beginning to migrate. Countless tribes had already begun to flee long before that. Huaisher couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the small fish and shrimps that he had gotten used to eating. "Do you have a place to go?" Huaisher asked. "You don't need to worry," the elder said. "We have tribes in all of the Abyss's territory. 2 tribes have already contacted me. No matter where you go, infants and pregnant women are valuable members." As he replied, the elder's expression was very calm. He didn't seem to be moved by the fact that the tribes were leaving. It wasn't uncommon for the Nagas to migrate. By nature, they wouldn't stay in one place for too long. Once a tribe had too many members and could no longer survive, they would split up on their own and begin a new migration. In addition, they would often be hired by the leaders of the Abyss's territory to do battle. Gathering and parting were common. The cold Nagas did not fear death, nor did they care about parting. As long as the laws and the eternal ring still existed and they could return to their homeland after death, they didn't care about anything else. Now, the original officiant had become the new leader of the Abyss's territory. He replaced the elder hire by Huaishur and continued to lead the migration of the new tribe. The elder would continue to serve Huaishur as the leader of the remaining undead army and white-scale guards until the end of the war. Not only that, he now shouldered a new mission: to recruit more tribes for Huaishur. Too much money was annoying. There were too many spoils of war to use up. After completely destroying the settlements of the 5 crown bearers, Huaishur naturally took over all of their belongings, including their lives, including the treasury. In addition to a large number of rare materials and treasures, the most abundant items were all kinds of disaster coins and equivalent items that could be used between hell. For Huaishur, these things had no use other than melting them as outer armor. All of them were rubbish. According to his plan, these things that he had no use for were actually thrown to the elders, but the amount of wealth was too exaggerated. It was so exaggerated that the elders carefully calculated, including himself. Even if he sold his life 10 times, he might not be able to repay this reward. Based on her respect for Huaishur and her pride as a warrior, she proposed a new plan: cash on the spot. Apart from a part of it being left to the Evergreen tribe as a reward, the rest of the property was used to recruit other large groups. So far, there were a total of 4 Naga tribes in the neighboring depths that responded to the elder's call and were willing to work for Huaishur. With the elder guaranteeing their credibility and loyalty, Huaishur was not worried about trouble. Not to mention that he had now been conferred the title of Verdant Mark. For the Nagas, he was simply a heroic figure and a spiritual leader. Maybe there would even be an additional morale boost. Huaishur simply left all these things to the elder to deal with. Not long after the blessing ceremony ended, he had already returned to the modification workshop of Sun's ship. After a complicated rinse and elimination of the outer layer, Huaishur finally changed into a set of light clothes. After walking into the airtight room, he skillfully dug out a can of happy water from the fridge. He could finally rest. He slumped on the chair like a salted fish and took out his phone, wanted to check the update. But when the screen lit up, he realized that there was no signal in hell, and he had already finished reading all the previous updates. Half of them were even leave slips. Huaishur frowned. This dog author wrote so little every day. He only wrote 70 to 80,000 words in a month. Isn't it too much to touch? Next time, I'll tie him up and send him to hell to write. You're back so soon? In the inner workshop, Anton walked out with a stack of design drawings. He glanced at Huaishur on the sofa and paused slightly. You look a lot calmer. He asked curiously, did something good happen? Huaishur didn't understand. Is there? Yes. The old professor nodded. At least you don't look so scary anymore. Huaishur was slightly surprised, but he had nothing to say. As a hero who protected the present realm, a member of celestial genealogy waged war and massacres in hell without any scruples. He didn't even leave the enemy any way out or leeway. He killed them all, not even sparing their souls and corpses. He shook his head in self-mockery. Did he start to lose himself in power and desire and do whatever he wanted? To a certain extent, I like hell very much. Huaishur sighed softly. Maybe I have some talents that aren't very good, but I can use them without any scruples here. I don't have to worry about hurting the people I care about and want to protect, causing irreparable consequences, perhaps. This is my dark side? Even the dark side is very solemn. Professor Anton sighed. Huaishur smiled. The word solemn shouldn't be used to describe such a cruel and cold thing. If it's something that should be done, then do it. Solemnity and seriousness are better than frivolity and perfunctory. Besides, we're not here for a charity event. Professor Anton replied calmly. Alchemists always say that miracles and disasters are equivalent, but I think that mercy and cruelty may also be the same. No one can be perfect. Huaishur, you don't need to feel any pressure because of this. Huaishur was stunned for a long time after hearing this. To be honest, I thought Professor Anton would blame me. Why would I blame you? The old professor was puzzled. You didn't do anything wrong. Hearing your assurance, I feel a lot more relaxed. Fleischer breathed a sigh of relief and closed his eyes. It seems that I can sleep well tonight. No, you can't. Professor Anton had already put on his external walking equipment. He turned around and stuffed a lot of things into Lucien's hands. Take these things. You have to come and work for me. What? Fleischer was stunned. The internal stress of this batch of finished parts is a bit high. You have to eliminate it. Among the models marked here, there are a lot of unqualified parts that need to be melted down and reworked. Time is a bit tight. I'll give you 2 hours to finish it. This Fleischer tried to shirk the work. If alchemy can solve the problem, can't you find Gregory? Alchemists do everything based on their feelings. He has already broken 2 batches of crystal plates. This is the last batch. Don't you worry? Anton glanced at him and said seriously, if you ask me, this is your dark side, Mr. Fleischer. You have to learn to say no to laziness. A real man never needs to rest. And Fleischer was still holding on to the slightest hope. And the lathe's cutter head is broken. You have to make a set of cutter heads first. Anton urged, don't dawdle. I need it urgently. In silence, Fleischer looked at the mountainous pile of work in front of him. He began to think. Was it too late for him to implement an 8-hour workday in hell? Thanks to the Pygmy King's remains rewarded by old, undead iron, the progress of the Sun ship's modification had been greatly improved, saving Fleischer and the others a lot of work. Pure natural, pollution-free, it could be used directly after being modified. It also filled in the gaps of a large number of materials. At the same time, it also gave Anton and Gregory the leeway to further display their abilities. When the Sun ship was assembled again, it had become a huge monster that even the workshop could not accommodate. The huge outline supported by the Pygmy King's bones was covered with thick armor. Its edges and corners were fierce. Compared to its original size, it had more than doubled. Just like a sleeping steel monster just crawling on the ground, it was like a pitch-black mountain range. And in the middle of the ship's hull, the hanging kobold was spitting out the symbol and emblem of the ivory tower bit by bit. This time, it was not only the armor that was renewed, but also the main battle weapon that was crucial to the warship was added. Under the pull of the steel cable, the pitch-black cannon body that was almost as long as the Sun ship was still being slowly and carefully lifted. The 2-meter-wide cannon muzzle was enshrouded in darkness, and a jaw-dropping sense of violence assaulted them. Countless cables modified from the Pygmy King's blood vessels were wrapped around it and sank into the steel. They slowly squirmed like living creatures, gradually lighting up the alchemy array. After 4 tests, and confirming that the connection was complete and that all the arrays and instruments were operating normally, everyone in the observation room could not help but cheer. Unfortunately, due to the scarcity of energy, they could not fire a goddamn cannon to celebrate. There was also no big toy for them to blow up. Suddenly, there was no such feeling, but it still feels a little empty. Fleischer walked around the wide deck twice. He felt that compared to the standards of the Abyss Development Bureau, the current firepower was still not enough. Should we get a few more close-range cannons? Or just add 2 more auxiliary cannons? No, we don't have enough equipment. Professor Anton shook his head. I've calculated the load capacity of the Red Dragon. Now, just the origin deflection shield alone takes up most of the computing resources. The fire control radar's chipset is too outdated. Also, the flight control system is still the same version as the Car of Destiny. It can't support more expansion interfaces. This was only the most important part now. It cannot be helped. They lacked everything. There's almost no damage monitoring, and emergency repairs were basically done by hand. A complete Sun ship's conventional combat form required at least dozens of crew members to divide the work and coordinate. Now, it was basically controlled by Beelzebub and Fleischer's large group. Radar, fire control, power, communication. Every one of them was a bottomless pit of resources. I could think of a way to solve the firepower part. Professor Anton sighed. But before solving the problem of the components, the modification progress can only be like this. A transit station? Fleischer understood. In hell, Other than the unreachable supply base, there was actually another place that could solve their urgent problems. An institution left behind from the utopia. Due to the deep backflow and the hasty retreat, a large number of equipment and instruments were abandoned in various hells. There was no lack of precious materials among them. Even if they were only recovered, disassembled, and reused, it could greatly enhance Sun's ship's combatability. After some calculations, Forster had already planned a new route. This was their next destination. Depth 51, Samara's third communication center. And before that, it was time to deal with the most important spoils of war. In the silence, everyone looked at the iron box on the table. The last remains of the Dwarf King. The heart of rock iron. Chapter 1047. The four sides of the metal box were engraved with mysterious symbols, and the rope of sorrow was still wrapped around it. Wisps of black smoke and sparks continuously floated out from the gaps between the chains, making the entire item appear both sinister and strange, as if it was a box of disaster that imprisoned a demon. In reality, it wasn't that far off. After Gregory had set up layers of defenses, Huaisher carefully unlocked the rope of sorrow. The moment the origin substance armor was unlocked, the dozens of mysterious symbols on the metal box began to shatter one after another. Immediately afterwards, everyone felt a wave of confusion wash over them. It was hard to breathe. This was the origin substance that had undergone a qualitative change after being tempered by the Sea of Thunder. It contained the power of destruction and calamity. The heart was beating. However, every time the heart in the box pulsed, everyone felt as if their hearts were about to stop beating for a moment. In just a few short days, the seal that was enough to imprison the person wearing the crown was about to completely collapse. Under the suppression of the steel and crystal, the rock iron heart continued to pulsate. The sound of friction was loud and clear, and sparks flew everywhere. Even just looking at it would cause one to feel dizzy. Their souls trembled in fear. Out of everyone present, the only one who wasn't affected was probably Huaisher, who had undergone a qualitative change. Its pulsation was unable to extract his soul at all. On the contrary, the pure light of origin substance was able to restrain the power that had been born after the solidification. After a short period of observation, Huaisher sensed that something wasn't right. He moved closer. He squinted his eyes and examined it. There was actually a small crack in the right side of the heart. "What is this?" Huaisher asked. "It seems to be damaged. That's normal. The reason this heart has been able to survive for so long is because it has been constantly extracting life force from the rusty tower to support itself during its dormant period." Gregory concluded. "Right now, it has already been awakened. As long as it continues to pulsate, it will passively extract origin substance and life force from within 100 kilometers to repair itself. This is the Gnome King's instinct. Our sealing and suppression won't be able to stop it. Instead, it will cause it to be consumed even faster while resisting the sealing. There's no way for it to be preserved for long, and the mysterious symbols connected to it will also be completely destroyed." "Then what should we do?" Huaisher scratched his head. "It's a disaster if we let it out, but it's also a hot potato if we keep it. If you can't use it, no matter how powerful you are still trash. Actually, it's very simple to apply it." Gregory suggested, "Just let it return to its own body. Just find a place to stuff it in." In a brief moment of silence, everyone looked at each other. In the end, they all looked behind them at the same time. Raymond was engrossed in his meal. Inside the rice bowl, Raymond felt the temperature of the air suddenly drop, as if something was wrong. He raised his head blankly and saw a few pairs of eyes glowing with a strange light. Subconsciously, he shuddered. "Hey, why is everyone looking at me?" He scratched his head and was amused by his own guess. "It's impossible to stuff such a big toy in my place, right? It'll break. Ha ha, ha ha." In a long silence, Raymond laughed until he couldn't laugh anymore. His smile gradually disappeared. "F***, are you guys serious?" He subconsciously shrank back a little, wanting to find a place to run, but Forster, who had appeared behind him at some point, had already pressed down on his shoulder. It was like an iron clamp. Good things. The chief engineer comforted him. It's all good things. Isn't it because you don't have this thing? So, I want to make it up to you? Gregory, who was eating melon seeds at the side, advised, it's always right to make up for whatever you lack. Besides, other than you, no one else is suitable. Fleischer spread his hands. Why don't you do it yourself? Raymond widened his eyes and said in a trembling voice, isn't your ultimate quite good at pretending to? You still have a celestial fault. The core of the ultimate is not connecting the inside and outside, but sealing it. Even if it can be put in, this thing is useless and can only be refined into a pile of scrap metal. Fleischer explained, the compatibility rate between the celestial fault and the Dwarf King's heart is not high, and there is still space left for the Nautilus. Besides, I don't have any experience, do I? I have to find something to try my hand at. Then you should find someone else. Raymond was horrified. Why are you looking for me? Aren't we familiar with each other? Fleischer gave a simple and honest smile. This is such a good opportunity, we can't let others take advantage of it, right? In this chilling silence, he instinctively looked at the only conscience in the team, but after Professor Anton noticed his pleading gaze, he was silent for a long time, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the end, he looked away awkwardly. He also felt that this arrangement was quite good. What about you? Raymond looked at the sun ship with his only hope. Why aren't you King saying anything? The red dragon moved back a little and pretended not to hear anything. It could not say that it was the one who suggested this from the beginning, right? You have to accept this reality. Fleischer comforted him. Think about it carefully, isn't it quite good? This was the straw that broke the camel's back. Tears finally rushed out. In fact, Fleischer's arrangement was not purely out of persecution, while at least 60% of it was not out of persecution. Instead, it was because Raymond was too suitable. To put it simply, this was just a heart transplant. If it were anyone else, they would have to undergo a removal surgery. However, Raymond did not need it at all. He did not have this thing decades ago. The stone heart that the Eye of Nightmare was responsible for transporting to the ruler, Eve Lit, was a precious essence nurtured by the mountains. It could heal all wounds. However, there was only one stone heart. Raymond and the Red Dragon had two. If one was saved, the other would have to die. Raymond chose to leave the future to his friends. When the Red Dragon brought him to the ivory tower, his body had already been completely eaten up by the rancher's curse. The transformation of the Eternal Road stigmata saved his life, but at the same time, he and the Red Dragon could share the same life under the connection of the stigmata. It happened to be the opposite of the other ascendants of the Eternal Road. He had become an accessory of the car of destiny. Now, a chance to save all of this was finally in front of the Red Dragon. It could not say no, because after I install it, Raymond will become at least 6 meters tall, and it will be even more difficult to find a girlfriend in the future and reject it. Right? Why would he want a woman? A real driver never needed that kind of thing. Women will only affect our driving speed. As long as I drive fast enough, my girlfriend won't be able to catch up to me. It was decided. Come, I'll hold his hand for you. Hurry up. 2 hours later, the Crimson Dragon's armored arm pulled its driver over and pinned Redmond, who was still struggling and crying, onto the operating table. Then, Fleischer skillfully covered Redmond's face with gauze that was soaked in tranquilizer. Afraid that it would not be effective enough, he added a lot of his own poisons and curses. Soon, Raymond's eyes turned white, and he gradually lost his strength. Before he completely lost consciousness, accompanied by the illusion of countless girls waving goodbye to him, the last thing he heard was Fleischer's crazy laughter and the roar of a spinning chainsaw. 2 days later, at noon, endless yellow sand flowed silently in the scorching hot air, and burning ashes slowly fell from the sky. And in this dead and desolate world, a huge door slowly opened. A passage from the depths of the abyss opened, and a tide-like army instantly covered the entire land. In the sky, strange birds spread their wings and gathered into an overwhelming dark cloud. The army from the fallen country majestically marched into the world. But when he looked around, there was nothing in the vast expanse of yellow sand. It was empty. Only desolation and death. Wrong place. The vanguard at the front, the solidifier, frowned and suddenly pulled the hunched navigator up. His 5 fingers tightened. You bunch of trash. You can't even find a wrong place. No, I didn't. Under the tattered gray robe, the navigator waved his 3 arms with difficulty and squeezed out a hoarse voice. I swear, I didn't find the wrong place. The tree map shows this place. This is it. You're telling me that this is the Rusty Tower Forest. The solidifier's face pulled up into a sinister smile. Are you kidding? Or is my brain muddled, and I can't tell the difference between this broken sand and the tower? I don't know. I really don't know. The navigator cried. Xing Chin's instructions can't be wrong. We've already arrived at the designated place. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Crack. With a crisp sound, the struggling navigator's body suddenly tensed up. Then, like a puppet that lost its strings, it collapsed and stopped moving. The solidifier coldly threw the rotten meat in his hand on the ground. The snake crawling on the ground was already unable to endure the hunger and thirst and instantly pounced on it. Soon, only a patch of rapidly drying blood was left on the yellow sand, and there was no trace left. The solidifier turned around and respectfully came to the side of the chariot and reported in a low voice, Lord Hades, please give me a little more time. No need. Behind the curtains of the chariot, Hades stood up and lifted the curtains. He looked at the dead world in front of him, and his expression gradually turned cold. We didn't go to the wrong place. He said, this is the Rusty Tower Forest. There is no mistake. As if to prove his words, the scorching wind swept up the dust and sand that covered the sky and earth, revealing the ruins that were buried underneath. The collapsed tower was like quartzite that had been weathered for thousands of years. The moment it was touched, it collapsed into a patch of gray sand. In the dead silence, no one spoke. Only the sound of the wind blowing through the world that had died once again was loud and shrill, as if mocking laughter from afar. Are you warning me? Why, sure. Are you showing off your power? Hades bent down and pinched the scattered yellow sand in his hand. His expression was gloomy and curious. Or are you trying to hide something? He pondered in silence. He felt as if he had finally grasped something. In this abyss, what was it that made a person of the realm so reluctant to part with it? It seemed that more clues were needed. After a short moment of silence, he slowly grinned, revealing a strange smile. The blessed land, the corrupt order, the purgatory workshop master, and those guys who were beaten so badly by celestial genealogy that they couldn't raise their heads, finally informed the Golden Dawn. Didn't they want to pay back? Hades looked down at the dust on the ground that looked like ashes and smiled coldly. Now it's time. Chapter 1048. All myths and legends had a crucial link to the creation of the world. The source codices of all lineages also had this crucial part. It would determine the composition of the stigmata and the foundation of miracles, as well as how to understand all things. Whether it was the sleeping gods, the gods wielding axes, the existences moving on the surface of the water, or the giants sucking the milk of cows in the cold winter, in essence, they were all describing the process of all things flowing out from the pillar of divine essence. No matter which one it was, the process was not much different. In the chaos, a power appeared. After breaking everything, the clean rose and the turbid fell, forming a magnificent world of the reality. All things operated in an orderly manner, but many myths did not mention it. In fact, it was the same for the destruction of the world. It was not much different from when all of this was created. When all things came to their final end, everything that had been sublimated would be solidified and destroyed in hell, and the huge reality would be torn apart. When countless fragments fell into the abyss, the so-called hell would be formed. Those light, empty, and insignificant things would gradually peel off and float in the shallow water, while the miracles that solidified into disasters would fall into the deep ocean. Even deeper, the purer and more glorious something was, the heavier it would be after solidifying and the further it would fall. It was because of this that the concept of depth was formed, as well as the general division. Humans used the quality of disasters or miracles as a yardstick to measure the abyss formed by the endless hell. The deep zone, the withered zone, the dark zone, the quiet zone, and even a many strange bottom of the abyss, and at the top, the place of eternal light surrounded by countless shattered borders, the reality. After unifying all of these existences, the entire world was the most real and complete appearance. Once, during the most prosperous period of the utopia, when the development of hell was the most popular, the places where human footprints were spread out were the existence of the deep zone today. The bronze eye clearly divided the many hells by depth, discovering countless ruins, relics, large groups of hells, and even barren domains. At the same time, all outposts and exploration bases were built in this deep zone. But in fact, if understood in the way of oceanography, all of this was just the upper layer of the sea of hell. The shallow zone. This was where the light of reality shone. At the same time, it was also the place with the most remaining life, force, and life. Countless large groups of life wandered, grew, killed, and died in this barren hell. However, they were unable to provide for the survival of true predators and behemoths. In the withering zones, however, there was no longer such a gentle environment. More calamities spread across the vast depths, leaving no place for the weak to stand. At the same time, it was also the battlefield and territory of many rulers. As for the deeper regions of the dark abyss, they had long been shattered by the war. Countless massive hells collided with each other, brewing endless calamity and destruction under the will of the rulers. The lairs of many rulers and behemoths were built here. This was because only the depth of this place could support the hell they were in, as well as the calamity and power they contained. Their existences were too heavy, and the essence of disaster they held was too great, so much so that this power had instead turned into invisible shackles that shackled them to a deeper level. Only when the tide from the silent area came could it float up to the range of the realm of discovery. Otherwise, he would have to give up most of his power and send down his incarnation. Or he would simply be damaged and stranded like the Twilight Village. As for the deeper regions of the silent area, they no longer had any clear structures. Even the rulers of the dark abyss did not want to come into contact with the endless sea of chaos. In that pure chaos and darkness, who knew how many strange existences and terrifying things there were? After suffering an unexpected loss, the former utopia could only choose to give up further exploration and withdraw all of its forces. The only result they brought back was a speculation and hypothesis called the bottom of the dark abyss. In the deepest regions of the silent area, there were dozens of strange domains that would even corrode and wither away their natural enemies. If there was a bottom in this endless dark abyss, then it must be the foundation of hell. It was not until the traveler Chuhai personally verified it that its existence was finally confirmed. The prophecy left by the former president, the 24 elements of destruction, was also built on this existence. The shadow rancher of the gods, the Pied Piper, the embodiment of chaos and destruction, and the crystallization of all abyssal wisdom and demonic hopes, Buoshun. They were all born from it. The appearance of the Golden Dawn was also influenced by it. And according to Russell's speculation, even the gray-robed man himself had mastered some kind of power under the arrangement of the former president. But everything was hidden in the past, and no one knew. Now, under the surging of the deep tide, the behemoths of the dark abyss began to rise again, and endless undercurrents filled hell. Within it, there was a small ripple that was quietly spreading out. It was like a stone smashed into a boiling pool. Just like that, the ripple called Huaishur stirred up a wave of the dark abyss under the push of the jesters. With the network formed by the jesters' truth palace as the foundation, it went down from the deep area, passed through the withered area, and even left a faint trace in the dark abyss. The dark abyss, the land of bliss. Amidst the eternal hymns and praises, The great light from God's throne shone on all things. Fanatical believers with wings on their backs gathered into a formation with no end in sight. After passing through layers of palaces, they stepped on the steps of sacrifice and walked towards the door of an audience. Above the vault of heaven, countless holy angels flew and danced, with pure smiles on their faces, sincerely praising this pure and noble faith, the only truth and essence in this world. And when the resounding bell rang like the bell before a meal, the archangel in the clouds held a bright golden scroll and descended on the ground. Countless hunting angels prostrated on the ground, respectfully receiving the decree from the great existence beside God. Under the throne, those holy spirits who listen to the teachings day and night and serve the only ruler of this world, drafted the latest offering and sacrifice. So, under the gaze of tens of thousands, the archangel opened the sixth supplement of today's fixed food menu in his hand and made an impassioned announcement. The appetizer, 10,000 believers, 16 solidifiers, 1 priest, 6 large groups. 2 furnaces fry until slightly yellow, grill with crystal charcoal, thin salt and fat should not be too much. After the first scroll was handed over, the recipient left with tears of gratitude. Then, the second, the third, and the fourth. A total of 2 soups, 1 main dish, 2 side dishes. Finally, the dessert needed 1 celestial genealogy member, why sure. The archangel solemnly handed over the order in his hand to the subordinate in front of him. Don't let the Holy Lord wait too long. Praise the Lord. Praise the great King. The king of the legion who received the order was moved to tears, holding the scroll with both hands, and solemnly promised, I will offer the Lord a clean meal. Very good, go. The archangel nodded with satisfaction. Behind them, the door of the blessed land opened with a loud bang. Then, countless hunting angels roared out, turning into a torrent and rushing in all directions. Once again, it enveloped the entire abyss. What is this? In the dark abyss, the land of bliss, a surprised voice came from the palace that was filled with moans and wails. On a gorgeous throne inlaid with jewels and beautiful jade, a man covered in a layer of gauze covered his mouth and screamed in surprise. What is this? What is this? The archbishop of the corrupt order, the ruler under Boishuan, who was known as the host of the banquet, had stars of longing and joy in his eyes at this moment. He hugged his chest with his hands and moaned excitedly. Ah, where did this little flower come from? It's so lovable. Right in front of him, the monsters kneeling on the ground held up the scroll in their hands, showing him the images sent by the jesters. The priest in yellow pointed at the figure in the middle and introduced, Why sure, male, 18 years old. Oh, it's a delicate flower. The host of the banquet shouted in surprise. Behind him, the strange mummies that were immersed in desire and revelry cheered in unison. Delicate flower. It needs patient care. The host of the banquet emphasized solemnly. So, the mummies roared, Care. The priest was stunned and hesitated, but the jesters are, I don't care about the King reward. The host of the banquet sneered, A bunch of unromantic dead ghosts. How would they know what love is? The mummies roared, Make love? I like him very much. The host of the banquet sucked his fingers and stroked the figure on the scroll in a daze. Go, bring him to me. Beauty is only worthy of the strong. Yes, the mummies praised fervently. In an instant, dozens of priests prostrated on the ground and promised solemnly, Yes. Just as the priests were about to leave after receiving the order, they were suddenly called back. There's more. The host of the banquet pointed at the scroll and said, Forget about the remaining 3 old dishes. Bring back the one next to them, too. He paused for a moment and carefully studied the truck driver's sluggish face. He nodded slightly. It's a bit ugly, but it has a unique flavor. It can be used as a side dish after the big meal. The mummies raised their arms and shouted excitedly, Side dish. Soon, the door closed again. From the palace, the never-ending revelry began once again. At the same time, in the depths of hell, In the thick fog that was filled with strange precipitation, sewage flowed. Countless shriveled corpses floated in the sewage. A pitch-black factory was constantly rumbling, producing day and night. Countless chimneys that pierced into the sky like a forest spewed out an endless stream of thick smoke. However, as the signal from afar arrived, the factory rumbled and shrank strangely, quickly turning into an incomparably huge fortress. The foundation of the fortress rose rapidly, and strange metal legs grew out. Together with the caterpillar tracks, it gradually disappeared into the distance amidst the rumbling. In the center of the fortress, under the symbol of the Purgatory Workshop owner, a brand new number appeared. Number 77. Today, the Silent Workshop owners joined the hunt. It wasn't only here, it wasn't even limited to the Golden Dawn, the Blessed Land, or any other place. Under the push of the jesters, whether it was the wandering dwarves in the Thunder Sea, the workshop owners hidden in various parts of the Dark Abyss, or the survivors who had fallen apart under the ravages of celestial genealogy, at this moment, all of them looked at the boundary between the deep zone and the withering zone with malice in their hearts. An existence named Huaishur. Deep Zone 51, Dust Wasteland. In a never-ending gray storm, the pitch-black sun ship rumbled forward, crushing the sharp stone pieces that were like thorns. Sparks flew everywhere. The rocks mixed in with the storm were like sharp blades, constantly scraping against the origin barrier. However, very quickly, under the guidance of the deflection field, the rocks flew behind the barrier like fish caught in an undercurrent, disappearing without a trace. Isn't this very fast? On the bridge, Huaishur praised. In just a short day and a half, we have already crossed 4 hells. At this speed, we will reach the 3rd communication center in 2 days. The premise is that no one blocks the way, Raymond reminded weakly. Now, he was leaning on his enlarged version of the captain's seat, like a giant bear being forced into a baby carriage. Now, this guy's height had swelled to 2 meters, and it was still growing at a rate of at least 10 centimeters per day. According to Gregory's estimation, the results of the surgery were quite satisfactory. When Raymond and the Rock Iron Heart were completely fused, his height should be fixed at around 9 meters. At this moment, after crying, throwing a tantrum, and hanging himself, he had already accepted reality in despair and said goodbye to his wives who had never existed and might never exist in the future. He had even entered the stage of "Isn't this pretty good?" It was indeed pretty good. However, when he spoke, his voice was still weak, and there was a trace of sadness in it. If I were a jester of the abyss, I would definitely not let you go. That kind of thing. What are you worried about? Huaishur calmly cracked the melon seeds that he stole from Gregory and spat them all over the ground. We are running so fast. He won't be able to catch up for a while. Besides, hell is so big. Can a person jump out of the wilderness and slash me? Before he finished speaking, everyone's face in the bridge had already turned green. You better shut your crow's mouth. Aren't we teammates? Why do you want to stick the flag into a dead end? After fully experiencing Huaishur's ability to walk backward, they no longer dared to doubt the mysterious power of the East. But this time, before they had time to pounce on Huaishur and cover his mouth, a piercing alarm sounded. The radar was screaming in a high-pitched voice. The unknown disaster reaction was close at hand. Immediately afterward, an unfamiliar voice sounded from the bridge. "Excuse me, is Mr. Huaishur here?" Chapter 1049. I'm not here. Huaishur answered without hesitation. I went out today. For a moment, dead silence descended on the entire bridge. Even the Red Dragon's alarm stopped abruptly. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. Forster's shotgun was already loaded in an instant. 2 prayer deer hunting bullets were ready to go. They just had to wait for the enemy to report their names. Aha! People in this realm are still so interesting. That calm voice reverberated through the bridge. No, to be precise, it reverberated through the entire interior of Sun's ship. Please do not make a big fuss over me. Right now, I'm right in front of you. Please stop your ship in time, or else. He paused meaningfully. Just as their hearts were beating wildly, he suddenly said, "Or else, you'll run over me." For a moment, countless question marks appeared on everyone's heads. Why would someone say such a cowardly thing in such an arrogant tone? Is this a joke? I'm not joking. Please hurry up. It's not easy for me to find you, the helpless voice said. Really? I'm about to run over you. Please stop quickly. In the silence, Raymond looked at Huaishur. Huaishur reached out and gestured for him to stop. The premonition of death did not appear. In other words, either the other party was not hostile, or they really could not do anything to Huaishur, or a combination of both. The sun spaceship stopped abruptly. The heavy chassis created sparks on the sharp stone ridges. Soon, the sparks disappeared in the dark storm. "Now, can I trouble Mr. Huaishur to come out and meet me?" The voice said, "I know this request is unreasonable, but my legs are inconvenient. I really can't pay you a visit." Sure. Huaishur smiled kindly. His hands did not stop moving as he loaded the cursed bullets into Beelzebub's magazine one by one. He sat in place without moving. However, an afterimage rose from his shadow, forming the appearance of Huaishur. Stepping on the iron ladder, he walked into the dark storm. Countless sharp pieces of stone and sand flew towards them. In the hurricane, under the terrifying pressure that was enough to suffocate them, the outline of a barren world was faintly discernible. However, there was nothing in front of him. "I'm out," Huaishur asked. "Where are you?" The voice said awkwardly. "I'm at your feet." Huaishur was silent for a long time. He bent down and lifted his feet, but he saw nothing. "Well, you can see me if you pry open that crack." That voice said, "Please, there's a rock that fell down just now. I can't take it anymore." Huaishur's face twitched. To be on the safe side, he took out an iron shovel and dug down. With a sharp sound of friction, the person buried under the rubble was finally revealed. Huaishur narrowed his eyes, leaned closer, and looked carefully. A snail? It was indeed a snail. What's more, it was a rather common rust snail. It was mainly active in deep water and could be seen almost anywhere with water. It fed on moss and had amazing endurance. More than 10 years of drought could only make it dehydrated and hibernate. But after 2 drops of water, it could jump up and down again. And more importantly, it could be eaten. As long as it was dried, the toxicity and precipitates would be discharged along with the body fluids. The meat was quite chewy. It was ranked 4th in the hell recipes launched by Huaishur and was the most common source of meat. And the grayish-white shell could be ground into powder to make nutrient drinks for new sublimators during their recovery period. A snail was talking to him? Huaishur scratched his head. What kind of illusion was this? "Yes, that's right. It's me. I'm a snail." The voice said, "Let me introduce myself, Mr. Huaishur. My name is Odom. You may be wary of me, but after seeing this, you should dispel your doubts." Ugh! Accompanied by a muffled groan, the snail squirmed on the ground as if it was trying hard. But after squirming for a long time, it was deflated. "Sorry, can you give me some water?" Odom said. "This body has been thirsty for too long and has no strength." In the silence, Huaishur took out a bottle of water from the ultimate with trembling hands. "It's for you." "No, it's too miserable. This guy is too miserable." He couldn't take it anymore. He originally thought that such a stealthy appearance was a terrifying enemy or a hero in the abyss, but he didn't expect it to be an edible snail that was almost crushed to death. Was this hell? Wasn't it too bizarre? After drinking a bottle of water, the snail seemed to have been pumped with air as it grew. Soon, the limbs outside the shell swelled rapidly. Then, like vomiting, it spat out a piece of sticky and shiny metal from its mouth. On the front of the iron plate was the emblem of a utopia, and on the back was the emblem of a black whale. At this moment, it was emitting the same origin substance fluctuations as the snail in front of him. To be precise, it was ridiculous that a snail could emit origin substance fluctuations. Moreover, according to the certificate, it was actually a subordinate member of the Utopia's hell. It had been granted a position and establishment, and it was an official employee unlike the cannon fodder of the undead. Now, In front of Weisher was a black whale. In the former research institute of a utopia, most of the members who were active in the depths were named after animals. Among them, not to mention the armed researchers, the white doves, the red deer, a merchant who wandered between hell to obtain resources for the ivory tower, and the gray stork, an agent who had disguised himself as a creature of hell to carry out secret missions in hell. And the last, the black whale, was simply the leader of a large group in hell. He was a local through and through. Let me introduce myself again. The snail said, "My name is Odom, a non-staff member who joined the Utopia 110 years ago. At the same time, I'm also your guide in the dark abyss. In your mission plan, there should be a related introduction." Weisher was stunned. Plan? That kind of thing was gone the moment they walked out of the emergence realm, let alone apply it. All this time, he had completely forgotten that he had a guide in hell. He rummaged through the end for a long time and finally found Odom's name in the guide section at the end. But the specific situation was not written at all. Russell only said that it would contact him when he reached the place. But he was already 20 depths away from the original meeting point. How could it come to him? Wasn't this tracking ability a little too terrifying? "Nice to meet you." Weisher subconsciously reached out to shake hands, only to realize that the other party did not have such a thing. In short, after repeated verification, he could be considered to have come into contact with suspicion and vigilance for the time being. Since it was an ally, it was naturally very good. There was good wine when a friend came. Please come in, please come in." Weisher stepped aside and led the way. But Odom stood in place, motionless. After a short and awkward silence, the snail whispered, "I'm sorry, I can't walk. Can I trouble you to give me a hand?" 10 minutes later, on the table on the bridge, Odom chewed on the vegetable leaves that Weisher brought over, and the two drooping eyes finally regained a little bit of life. "Oh, I'm starving. This body has been hibernating for decades and is about to die. Anyway, thank you very much." Odom let out a carefree voice. "But it's really good to see everyone safe and sound again. After all, the pursuit of the ministers was a little worrying." Again, Weisher felt that something was not right. Actually, we've met once before." Odom coughed. "But that time, before I had time to speak, you pulled out my shell and threw it into the pot. If you ask me, my taste is actually not very compatible with curry. You should try boiling it. After boiling it, everyone said that it's very fresh and tender. It'll taste very good with some salt." For a moment, the corners of Weisher's eyes began to twitch. It was hard to understand. So, he had unknowingly eaten an ally? Please don't mind it. If you want to survive in hell, you have to have a little specialty, Odom explained. To put it simply, you can treat all the rust snails as an extension of my senses. As the leader of the swarm, I have to have some special skills. Ahem, let's skip over these trivial matters. I came here in a hurry because I have something important to inform everyone. The snail paused for a moment, thought carefully, calmly analyzed, and finally said straightforwardly, "You're in big trouble." As a non-staff member of the Republic in Hell, Odom's days were actually quite leisurely. Although he was the leader of a large group, the rust snail was too harmless. The Republic did not have any expectations for his combat ability. He basically acted as an intelligence source for the Republic and regularly reported what he had spied on through the rust snails. He did not ask for anything in return, nor did he want to use this to obtain anything. He was the kind of volunteer who worked for free. In any case, he had nothing to do. As long as the rust snail was not completely extinct, there was no possibility of it dying. In the entire deep zone, there were always one or two of them wherever there was water. Moreover, they laid tens of thousands of eggs at once. They were resistant, durable, and tenacious. Although they were so small that almost no one cared about them, and they most often appeared in pots and dining tables, their tenacious vitality still continued. Even hell could not erase them. In this long and endless life, if one did not want to completely degenerate into an ignorant beast or be driven crazy by boredom and dullness, one had to find some entertainment for themselves. And for more than 100 years, The biggest entertainment in hell was probably celestial genealogy. Later on, after the Republic was gone, he was not affected much. He lazed around for decades until Russell contacted him again and entrusted him with the job of a guide. His instincts told him that there would be new entertainment this time. Sure enough, celestial genealogy had never disappointed the snail when it came to causing trouble. Even if there was an accident midway, he could always sense the traces of Huai and the others through the rust snail's perception. After the crash, not only did these guys not suffer any setbacks, but they were like bandits who had broken out of prison and wild dogs that had escaped from their leash, setting off a bloody storm in hell. And now, because of Huaishi's existence, the entire deep zone and the withering boundary were in chaos. Well, although it had always been chaotic, this time, there was finally order amidst the chaos. At the critical juncture of the impending War of the Worlds, a new storm was brewing once again. Relying on the enmity with the old seniors, as well as Huaishi's own actions, the destruction of the Republic, the Blessed Land, the corrupt order, the Sea of Lightning, the Infernal Workshop Master, the Human Exhibition Bureau, the Hunting Group, the Children of Apocalypse, the solidifiers that wandered between the various hells. In total, there were more than 16 organizations, more than 30 crowns, 70 to 80 legions, hundreds of large groups, and all kinds of messy characters began to rapidly appear, approaching this area at an unprecedented speed. There were only 3 things that everyone wanted to do here. Huaishir, and it was still Huaishir. The last time I saw someone get messed up like this, it was Chuhai before he became a natural enemy. Speaking of this, Odom could not help but be overjoyed. Just thinking of such a good, such a dangerous thing, I couldn't help but rush over. For some reason, Huaishir smelled a terrible aura from his guide. The aura of a fun-loving person. You're just here to watch the show. Chapter 1050. After a long period of experience, Huaishir had concluded an objective pattern. All the former members of the Utopia were more or less seriously ill. Not to mention the seniors who had already passed away. Those who were left behind were either a little or a lot of them. And the problem was huge. None of them were normal, including the non-staff member in front of him. When he mentioned that there was a show to watch, his eyes almost shone. Ahem, although we came here for fun, as a guide, I should still advise you to pay attention to your safety, be wise, and return home in time. Seemingly aware of his gaffe, Odom coughed twice and tried to put on a very serious look. I can provide a safe shortcut to help everyone return to the present realm. Don't worry, it won't be long. By this time tomorrow, you can have lunch in London. Although he said that, the abstract expression of the snail was already filled with an expectant look of don't go, please. As a poor, weak, and helpless snail, Odom had fallen into a difficult struggle. On one hand was fun, and on the other hand was duty. The snail was really unable to choose. In the silence, he peeked at everyone's expressions, and everyone was also looking at Huaishir. It was time to make a choice, but Huaishir did not speak. Just silence. He suppressed the urge to sigh. Sometimes he would hate himself for becoming a tool, but sometimes he could not help but want to become a carefree tool again. At least he did not have to face the consequences of his choice. If this was a game, he would have rolled up his sleeves and ked his mother. But this was not something as trivial as a game. If they lost a team battle, everyone would restart at the resurrection point, and they would only lose a little money. But in this place, which was 50 depths away from the present realm, once they lost, there would be no room for redemption. Professor Anton, who had great trust in him, Gregory, who had returned to hell after decades of herding sheep, Forster, who was originally living a peaceful life in the Iron Crystal, Raymond, and the Red Dragon, who were willing to sacrifice their lives for their companions if he rashly advanced. Everyone might die because of their own choices. But if they were to turn back just like that, where would their future and mission be? Sorry, I want to give it a try. Huaishir sighed and told them, if you want to vote on this, I won't stop you. I have no objections. Forster raised his hand while smoking. I'm fine with anything. Anyway, I'm herding sheep everywhere, Gregory said. There's no difference. I still have loans to repay. Before Raymond could finish, he coughed awkwardly. If you don't mind another bad debt, I don't mind. Then let's do it. Anton put down the stainless steel coffee cup and said slowly, Where in the world would you run away with your tail between your legs before the enemy comes? I'm already here. When he spoke, the old professor looked calm and tranquil, like a retired engineer who was chatting with someone about where to go for a walk after supper. He lowered his head and peeled the shells of the melon seeds. His wrinkled and speckled fingers were as steady as a lathe. He pinched the thin and fragile kernels out of the cracks and threw them into the coffee foam. In the dense heat, the kernels floated silently and swirled with the undercurrent in the cup. It's time to make a decision. Why sure, Anton said. This is your responsibility. So, in this long silence, Huaisher let out a long breath, and his expression gradually calmed down. Then let's move forward. Raising his head, he addressed the crowd. Everyone, please put the matter of luck to the back of your mind. There is no need to consider any path of retreat or stability, because I will put everything I have on the gambling table, including the lives of all of you here. No matter what happens, no matter how many enemies there are, our plan will not change, and our destination will not waver. If anyone tries to stop us, we'll crush their bones and bunkers together. As if he could see the endless enemies in the distance, Huaisher announced softly, If hell wants to be our enemy, then we will fight to the death with hell. No one said anything. Only 4 of them raised their hands and calmly seconded the motion. From the moment they left the present realm, from the moment they accepted this mission, they didn't think about retreating. Either they succeeded and regained the afterglow of the past, or they died without a burial place and quietly disappeared in a corner. No matter which result was waiting for him in the future, Huaisher would gladly endure it. This is my answer to you, Mr. Odom. Huaisher said to the snail. Next, it's your turn to fulfill your duty. I hope we can all fulfill our mission. Of course. The water-embroidered snail waved its tentacles in ecstasy. It did not care about the hint of ridicule in Huaisher's words at all. Instead, it became even more excited. I really didn't misjudge you, Mr. Huaisher. I can be sure that you are definitely a pillar of celestial genealogy. Huaisher was amused. Is being good at courting death also considered a pillar? I don't know about other genealogies, but in celestial genealogy, isn't this a great advantage? In Odom's opinion, Huaisher's behavior was definitely the most upright in the Republic. He might even be more upright than Russell. Wasn't it the group of guys who killed their way into the abyss back then like this? As long as they could not die, they would do it. They did not even blink when fighting with enemies dozens of times their own. They dug up the graves of rulers and blew up the ruins from dozens of years ago. After blowing up and digging up, they even had to press the guys who came knocking on their door to the ground and rub them against the ground. It was either you die, or you die, or you die. They did not know how to compromise, avoid, or back down. For the sake of their own heaven, they did not hesitate to create more hells in hell. It even made the monsters begin to doubt who the real monster was. This was the so-called Republic. After so many years, Odom finally understood this familiar feeling again. He was so excited that his eyes were almost filled with tears. He was extremely glad that he had made the decision and foresight back then. Sure enough, no matter how boring it was, as long as it was related to the Republic, it would instantly become full of fun. At the thought of being able to sit in the VIP seat and witness everything from the beginning to the end, Odom trembled with excitement. His appetite increased, and he even ate 1 or 2 more dishes. The degree of deliciousness had greatly increased. Then, according to the contract, I will wholeheartedly provide all the services I can to all of you. Odom waved his tentacles as if he was bowing to the guests. Until the end of the mission or the end of death. You don't have to say anything boring. Huaisher asked directly, Where is my enemy? Based on the current situation, in about 2 days, no. In 1 day, you will encounter the army of Blessed Land. But before that, In order to delay your advance, the corrupt order that is closest to Blessed Land has already mobilized a few of their armies to repair a new gate at the key entrance of Hell. Odom slowly moved on the table, the heavy metal in his body leaving a mercury-like trail wherever it passed, outlining the specific depth distribution map. It highlighted the city gates that were constantly being surrounded by enemies. If I'm not wrong, they will delay you here at all costs and wait for the main force to arrive. When the time comes, they will capture you in one fell swoop. As for the closest, its abstract expression became particularly subtle as it stopped in front of a city gate on the map. If you maintain this speed, you will see them in about half an hour. Then should I congratulate them? Huaisher looked out of the bridge at the gray storm that covered everything, full of anticipation. After all, the prey is already in front of us. In the violent storm, a high-pitched cry burst forth. In the terrifying wind formed by endless dust and stone fragments, dozens of dazzling lights appeared. The pitch-black sun ship used all its strength to prop up a deflection shield, crushing the ground and moving forward. Tearing through the storm, breaking through the barrier, they no longer concealed any traces of their movements. The surging waves of origin substance were like the fission in a furnace, radiating in all directions. Accelerate. In the huge space below the deck, accompanied by the continuous sound of metal scraping, the silent Nagas opened their arms, and with the help of mechanical arms, put on heavy armor and pulled down their masks. Behind the goggles, their eyes were cold and gloomy, revealing the light of killing intent. They were ready to go. Compared to the silence here, the workshop behind them rumbled endlessly. Under the shouts of the shamans, huge lizard beasts walked on the transmission pedals, following the tracks that were like an assembly line, disappearing into the heavy doors and darkness. The sharp sound did not stop. Measuring, stamping, cutting, assembling, welding, loading, and fitting. In a short 3 minutes, the heavy steel that ordinary bodies could not bear covered their bodies. They were armed from the tail to the tip of the claws, and even the back with exaggerated heavy cannons. The armor formed by the cursed crystal alloy covered every inch of their skin, and the secret instrument from the primordial curse stimulated the most violent bestial nature, causing them to spit out blazing white mist from their mouths and noses. They felt unprecedented hunger and excitement, and they did not fear injury or death. The shamans walked between the arrays, waving the poisonous branches in their hands, loudly singing praises of the eternal ring, and sprinkling the blessed dew. In a short 15 minutes, the sun ship that advanced at full speed had already crossed the hell in front of them, breaking through the eternal storm. In the rumbling sound, the earth trembled. At the city gate at the end of hell, the alarm had just sounded. On the bloody bone wall, the dazed hell creatures raised their heads and screamed. The slave workers who were building the wall under the whip froze in place, not even noticing the loosening of the suspension ropes and the pressure of the boulders. Soon, the sound of a bugle horn rang out. The smooth flow continued to cover the city wall, causing the gloomy white bone wall to shine brighter than gold and iron. Not only that, but cold light pillars rose from the ground like a cage, blocking the path in the air. When the boiling molten iron poured on the huge door that was dozens of meters tall, the final path was completely sealed. More and more boulders were piled up behind the door, desperately reinforcing the tortoise shell. They did not expect any achievements, nor did they intend to obtain any gains in the war. The group leaders guarding here made the wisest choice the moment they saw the sun ship. Send the message. Send the message immediately. The ghoul warlord turned his head and roared at the shaman. Tell them that the people who appeared are here. There was no need to fight. As long as they sent a message, there would be 6 legions supporting them at any time. Moreover, there would be a reward from the Holy Lord later. How could there be such a good thing in the world? The warlord rubbed his hands in ecstasy. This was a big win. This scale is a bit of a loss. On the bow deck of the sun ship, Huaisher looked into the distance, estimating the number of enemies in the city and sighing regretfully. It was not worth it. Behind him, The venerable elder knelt on one knee and solemnly swore, "Before sunset, I will take this place for you." Fleischer smiled and waved his hand slightly. "No need to be nervous, venerable elder. The sun will not set here today. Just do as you please. But before that," he paused and softly said, "let us light up the sun first." Following his words, the sun's ship roared loudly, and a huge power burst out from the furnace of the engine, pushing the steel structure to slowly move. Sparks shot out from the joints of the steel. On the hull of the ship, the scalp-numbing cannon slowly lifted up and aimed at the city pass in the distance. Level 2 drive, origin substance filled. The process of qualitative change was activated. Then, with a thunderous heartbeat, Raymond, who was wrapped in countless cables, opened his eyes. His eyes shot out the same electric light as the cannon. Sunship Battle Main Cannon. Tears of Isis. Fire. Chapter 10:51. In that instant, Raymond's body quickly shriveled under the layers of coiling cables. The tall and sturdy giant instantly turned into a withered and shriveled corpse. However, under his chest, his heart was still frantically beating, bursting forth with an unprecedented deep echo. Countless cables were like bandages, wrapping around the steel skeleton and pulling him into the core of Sun's ship. The iron coffin-like engine cover rumbled open and swallowed him. Flesh and blood quickly spread on the steel, from inside to outside, causing the Red Dragon's roar to resound in all directions. An invisible tide shrouded the wasteland and even the city pass. It was a perfect circle with a radius of 10 kilometers, a precise and perfect mathematical miracle. Apart from Sun's ship that was enveloped by the circle, all living creatures let out mournful cries under the beating of the heart. Blood quickly seeped out from their noses and mouths, pulling at their souls. The invisible waves contracted inwards. On the city wall, countless slave workers and even guards fell like raindrops. The mournful souls merged into the storm and entered the engine. Immediately after, the cannon began to brew. After the third qualitative change of origin substance, those solidified souls had already completely transformed into pure origin substance in the furnace, radiating with a divine radiance. It shot out in all directions. Immediately after, endless flying sand assaulted their faces. It was as if in the blink of an eye, everything had arrived at the country beside the Nile River where the sun shone brightly. There was no sound of thunder, only the sound of waves and mournful cries from the yellow sand that assaulted their faces. The melancholic sound of a flute spread out from the reeds in the distance. The sound of the river echoed in everyone's ears. Under the illumination of the illusory sun wheel that appeared out of nowhere, Isis's tears flowed in hell. The tears of the compassionate goddess washed away everything. A line of gray and black extended forward in a perfectly straight line. Wherever it passed, everything quickly collapsed into gray and black mud, dissolving into the bottomless torrent and returning to the underworld river. The stench of decay and death descended. In front of the cannon muzzle, regardless of whether it was the earth, the city pass, or even the city wall itself, as well as the guards who were affected, everything was rapidly fading, merging into the gray and black color. Only the sluggish flow of sludge was left. Skeletons and aquatic plants emerged from the mud. In the past, when Alice's fell, Isis's tears turned into a torrent. The merciful river revealed its ferocity and covered the entire upper and lower Egypt, taking away countless lives to accompany her husband. At this moment, with Sun's ship as the fulcrum, the miracles of the past welcomed the reappearance of the miracles once again. Even if the power of this was less than a tenth of the true miracles, it was still enough to break through all the fortified cities and wreak havoc. Accompanied by the rumbling of the collapse, the city wall shook violently. A gap that was dozens of meters wide silently appeared on the towering iron wall. Below the gap, only mud was slowly flowing. The water of the Nether River rippled again. The sun ship was moving above the river, rushing forward toward the ridiculous defense in front of it. He had not backed down at all. Crash! Shockwaves sent rocks flying everywhere, and deafening noises that tore apart countless eardrums reverberated in this narrow space. Countless infernal realm soldiers were flung off the city walls and landed on the ground. In an instant, their bones and flesh were smashed to a pulp. Behind the collapsed city walls, the ferocious sun ship was still intact. From top to bottom, it cast a shadow of fear. On the bow of the ship, Huaisher overlooked all of this and said without turning his head, "Now, please bring me victory. I will not disappoint you." The elder raised his head and promised hoarsely. He stood up and drew his sword, roaring behind him. After the hatch was opened, the silent torrent had already been waiting for a long time. The scarlet eyes of countless Nagas were already glowing with a cruel light. When the heavy hatch on both sides of the ship was lowered, a steel torrent covered in frost surged out. When the brilliance of white phosphorus and iron gathered in one place, it surged like a blizzard, forming an avalanche that rolled forward. A bone-piercing chill spread. In the huge space of the ship's hold, a cold fire burned. Dozens of shamans surrounded the fire and fervently chanted praises. They tossed the corpses of their enemies into the fire in exchange for the Eternal Ring's favor. Soon, the favor from the deepest depths of infernal realm descended on the blades of the descendants, causing streaks of blood to quickly condense into crimson snowflakes. They soared into the air and quickly fell back down. The severe cold that could freeze an ordinary person to death in an instant did not kill the Nagas. Instead, it allowed their cold blood to burn without restraint, preventing their bodies from turning into charcoal. Death and winter descended on this narrow city pass. Paleness and blood quickly spread. In front of the advancing white phosphorus guards, the tough bodies and fearless fighting spirit that the ghouls were so proud were of no use. The barely constructed terrain also instantly exploded and melted under the attack of the armored lizard's molten cannons. Unstoppable forward, under the heavy guard of his subordinates, the ghoul warlord finally woke up from his shock. He barely managed to dispel the chill and fear that had seeped into his bones, but the hand holding his blade couldn't stop trembling. Not good. If this continues, he didn't dare to think about it anymore. He turned back and roared, "Reinforcements! Where are the reinforcements?" They're almost here." The hunchbacked ant diviner trembled as he replied. "They said, they're on the way." In his daze, the warlord seemed to hear the chirping of pigeons among the clamor and shouting. Even the pale faces of the ghouls were burning red in anger. Damn it, what's the use of having them? Reinforcements that didn't arrive weren't reinforcements. Benefits that didn't reach their hands weren't F*King benefits. By the time they arrived, their corpses would already be cold. "Why don't we retreat?" his adjutant suggested in a trembling voice. But before he could finish, the warlord suddenly turned back and stared at him with his scarlet eyes. It was only when that face began to twitch in fear that the warlord coldly said, "We're lacking a supervisor in front. You go." The adjutant didn't dare to disobey. He raised his sword and charged forward with reinforcements, never to return. For a moment, the tent fell into a deathly silence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to speak of retreat or surrender. It wasn't just the warlord's ferocity, but the Holy Lord's order. Once the Holy Lord was angry, just thinking about it made everyone's legs go weak. But in this silence, the loud noise in the distance became clearer and clearer. Accompanied by a low muffled sound, a blazing wave of air tore the tent apart and rolled up the torn leather. When the warlord looked up in shock, he heard a hoarse roar from afar. The venerable elder at the front had already broken into the innermost layer of the city pass with his men. This distance was completely within reach, and at that moment, the venerable elder also saw him. Behind the broken helmet, the scaly face curled up the corners of his mouth and smiled crazily. "Kakarona," she shouted hoarsely, "can you still keep up?" "Yes." The burly Naga panted and raised his large shield to block the javelin that whistled towards her. The venerable elder asked, How many of us are left? Kakarona turned back and hurriedly counted the personal guards behind him. He shouted, 16. Okay, keep up with me. Tell me when there are 6 left. The elder held the cracked scimitar in his mouth and pulled out a heavy steel spear. He raised it high and swung it down violently, smashing the skull and helmet of the ghoul in front of him into pieces. Stepping on the bones, he charged straight into the formation that was advancing towards him. It was as if a huge rock had been thrown into the waves, splashing blood everywhere. With the enhancement of the armor and the mystic instrument, the curved steel spear swept across and violently defeated those who dared to stop her. However, one of the ghouls on the ground suddenly reached out and grabbed her leg tightly, trapping her for a moment. The spear broke. Then, another ghoul pounced on her and stabbed the short sword into the gap in the armor, without caring about its own safety. It pierced through the abdomen and protruded out from the back. The venerable elder roared. After crushing the ghoul on the ground with her foot, she stabbed the ghoul's throat with the broken spear and nailed him to the ground. Nailed to death. Then she blacked out. After a moment of absent-mindedness, she heard a mournful howl in the wind. The arrow had pierced through her eye socket. Bastard, come and fight with me. She roared and violently pulled the arrow out of her eye socket. Ignoring the blood gushing out, she took out the scimitar in her mouth and stepped forward. Take her down. The warlord grunted coldly and released the bowstring in his hand. He ordered his men, I'm going to make a blanket out of her skin. Dozens of ghouls drew their swords and surrounded the venerable elder. But behind the venerable elder, her personal guards rushed forward without caring about their own safety and opened up a critical gap for her. The warlord pulled the bowstring again and aimed it at her head. The arrow whistled through the air, but this time, the venerable elder's single eye stared at the warlord's movements. She raised her arm and blocked the fatal arrow. Her intact arm armor was torn apart by the terrifying arrow. Only her undamaged right arm was left, holding the broken scimitar tightly. She gritted her teeth, and her lips split open. Venom dripped down from the corner of her mouth and sizzled. Like a mad dog with a dead target, she charged forward. Garcarona followed behind her and instantly felt the pressure around him increase. When he turned around, he realized that there were only 4 personal guards left behind them. They were not even enough to cover them and break out of the encirclement again. Venerable Elder, he shouted in panic. The Venerable Elder did not turn around. Instead, he increased his speed and stepped forward. Ignoring the people who were blocking his way, he broke free from the broken armor that was protecting him and flew over this insignificant obstacle. She pounced on the enemy in front of her. Die! The warlord grunted coldly and released the arrow. The fatal arrow flew out again and sank into the venerable elder's face. But in the air, her body expanded rapidly as if she had transformed into a huge snake. Atavism. She closed her teeth and bit down on the 2 broken pieces of the arrow. The snake's eyes burned with a crazy light. The warlord froze on the spot. He only felt his vision turn dark. The mournful cold light expanded rapidly and occupied his vision. Slash! Silently, amidst the clamor and shouts of the chaotic battle, the 2 passed by each other. The venerable elder rolled on the ground and staggered as she tried to prop herself up. She opened her mouth and violently vomited broken organs and blood. As for the ghoul warlord, he fell on his back, blood spurting out from his neck. A head rolled on the ground. The frightened face was still staring blankly, trying to see what had happened. But in the spinning world, the last thing he saw was the venerable elder's snake eyes. And behind her, on the pitch-black outline of the sun's ship, there was a figure coldly witnessing everything. The illusory light of the sun's ship enveloped that person. In the darkness that quickly engulfed everything, it became the last ray of light. At the last moment, he finally came to a realization. It's the sun's ship. For a moment, all sounds seemed to have disappeared. The sounds of fighting and shouting came to an abrupt end. In the dead silence, all the ghouls turned their heads in a daze and looked at the 2 figures surrounded by enemies in the deepest part of the city. The leader of the horde had disappeared. With Jacarona's support, the venerable elder gritted her teeth and raised the spoils of war in her hand. Still not surrendering, she roared hoarsely. The bleeding head dyed her face red, making it hard to tell whether it was the blood or her eyes that were more vivid. Countless Nagas roared excitedly. The cold wave quickly spread and enveloped the entire city. The venerable elder supported her body with all her might. Even if all the ghouls around her crawled and surrendered or were hacked to death, she still did not fall. She only raised her head and tried her best to look into the distance, until the figure at the bow nodded slightly and turned to leave. She closed her eyes in satisfaction. Chapter 1052. Half an hour later, the last ray of light in the sky faded away. A crack suddenly opened up on the ground. Strange giant worms drilled out from under the earth's crust, opened their mouths, and spat out a pitch-black array that covered the entire city pass. Countless large groups of murderous soldiers were transported by the deep worms. After crossing 2 depths in an instant, they descended into this endlessly stormy hell. But in the dead silence, all the soldiers sharpening their swords fell into an instant of sluggishness. Everything was silent. In front of him, there was no intense battlefield, no desperate slaughter. There were only ruins everywhere. The traces of frost had yet to dissipate, and the mud of the Netherworld River, which had melted countless corpses, was still emitting a pungent, poisonous gas. Even countless corpses, everything had ended long ago. What was left in front of all the reinforcements was only a ruin full of corpses, quietly exuding the aura of decay and death. Gone. Everything was gone. At the very front, the dark green plague cavalry froze where they were, looking at everything around them in shock. In the end, their gazes fell on the center of the city pass. It was a deep crack that penetrated all the defenses. It was as if a huge monster was trampling on the earth, approaching step by step, chiseling through the unreachable city pass. After violently crushing everything in its way, it went all the way to the end of hell. What was left was only a crack that spread to the end of the earth and the storm. The hollow eyes of countless corpses had lost their luster, as if they were still staring blankly at these late reinforcements. Even the elite soldiers, who had experienced hundreds of battles, could not help but feel a chill down their spines. Were they here to hunt down the ascendants from the present realm, or had they accidentally barged into the hunting grounds of some strange monster? Where's the warlord here? Under the heavy armor covered in rust and dried blood, the Grand Knight took off his mask. His scarred face was full of ferocity. Soon his subordinates, who had gone deep into the ruins, brought back a shriveled head. This bunch of trash. The Grand Knight's 6 fingers tightened, and he angrily crushed the head. They can't even stall for time. What's the use of having them? But even so, he couldn't dispel the chill in his heart. Less than a minute had passed since they received the news. In other words, the Ghoul Legion, which had the geographical advantage and were the best at defending and defending, had been completely wiped out by the enemy. By the time they had arrived, the enemy had already left. The mess left behind was a mockery to those who came later. Not only were traces of God's mark inscriptions observed at the scene, but the other party even had super heavy siege weapons, no less than 5 Nagas and related equipment. How was this the group of jesters talking about a group of passers-by and a few celestial genealogy members who had nowhere else to go? This was clearly a large legion armed to the teeth, a super large bomb thrown into reservoirs and muddy ponds to blow up fish. If not for the fact that Utopia was long gone, he would even suspect that those lunatics had restarted the Hell development plan. Even with this, they still wanted to capture him alive? Are you kidding me? We found traces of their departure. They shouldn't have gone far. The returning sentinel reported in a hoarse voice, "Should we give chase, sir?" In a short silence, the Grand Knight did not speak. He just silently crushed the skull in his hand. After a long time, a chill appeared at the corner of his eyes. Continue to search for traces at the scene. The rest of you, rest on the spot and wait for reinforcements. The Grand Knight coldly glanced at the rainbow light at the end of hell and sneered. Since they overestimated themselves and wanted to break into the scar area and walk a dead path, let them struggle in vain for a while. He did not punish them for their momentary anger because of the traces at the scene. The Grand Knight was even unmoved. Coward? Could the art of war be called cowardice? This was called hiding one's claws and waiting for a good opportunity. No matter how fierce the charging formation of the Plague Knights was and how tenacious their lives were, could they fight against that kind of super-large war weapon? Stop King joking. The sentinel nodded and sent a message to his subordinates behind him. Immediately, people scattered in all directions and went deep into the ruins to search for clues. There were also supervisors who drove the slaves and servants to clean up the empty space, set up camp, and boiled water to replenish the food of the plague soldiers and warhorses. Only the priest who followed the army walked up angrily and asked coldly, "You are so lazy. Are you not afraid of incurring the wrath of the Holy Lord? Everyone is working for the church. Do you think you're the only one who is loyal to the Holy Lord?" The Grand Knight sneered. "How about this? I will immediately break camp and chase after them. When the time comes, I will let you take the lead because of your sincerity. How about it? I will also give you this credit without taking the slightest bit of it. If you agree, I will immediately swear to the wisdom of the devil that I will never violate it." The priest's expression twitched. His vertical pupils coldly glanced at him. After a long time, he did not speak. He flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. In the same place, the Grand Knight was also silent. He looked at the priest's back. It was not the first time that this old thing was in the way. This time, there were so many ghouls sacrificed at the scene. One priest would not be missing, right? Just as his hand was quietly pressing on the hilt of his sword, a loud sound suddenly rang out behind him. The cracks in the ground cracked open again. Another huge worm burrowed into the ground. Its huge mouth opened, and huge spiders covered in skeletal armor walked out under the control of a withered hand. On their gray skin, the blood-colored inscriptions bestowed by the Holy Lord were emitting a dark purple light. The strange fluctuations of the secret ritual shrouded their gray robes. After receiving the signal from the Plague Army, in less than half an hour, another Spider Spirit army that was originally sent to the War of Worlds changed direction and was sent here. Moreover, all of them were priests blessed by Bustling. They were also equipped with giant white wind cannons and mutated behemoths that were dozens of meters tall. The importance that the banquet host attached to this matter was obvious. The Grand Knight's hand loosened the hilt of his sword and urged his horse to meet them. He had just taken 2 steps when he suddenly felt his mount sway. It was as if he had stepped on a crack in a stone, and he staggered. But when he lowered his head, he saw that the ground was slowly cracking open. Thus was jumping, not far away. The huge worm began to twitch violently. It seemed that it could not wait to spit out the behemoths in its mouth, and wanted to shrink back into the earth's crust. Then, golden sand floated down from the sky and landed under the Grand Knight's helmet. The wind blew the sound of tides in the distance, bringing with it the smell of mud and decay. "What is that?" The Grand Knight looked up in shock, but he heard thunder bursting out from the ground again. It came from the distance, and, at the end of his sight, there seemed to be a mountain range pushing forward. A huge black shadow slowly rose, revealing a ferocious silhouette. "Holy! Holy! Holy!" Amidst the fanatical shouts and praises of countless kobolds, Sun's ship returned from the end of hell. Its sharp armor was covered in scarlet blood. It crushed the ground as if it was moving on the sea. The heavy bow of the ship opened up the ground and squeezed the soil, causing rough bulges and waves to appear on the ground. At the very front of the ship, iron chains were stretched taut. Under the violent whipping of the kobolds, the ghoul captives covered in wounds foamed at the mouth. They did not dare to slack off in the slightest as they exerted all their strength to pull on the chains and madly charged forward. It was unknown whether they were trying to pull Sun's ship forward or if they were afraid that they would be swept under the bow of the ship and crushed to pieces like the other ghouls. Ah, the day of destruction is coming. The day of destruction is coming. Bow down to Bahamut. The scorching sun rises from the abyss. Following judgment and destruction, we will live forever in death. Accompanied by the loud rumbling of the ship's advance, countless fanatical shouts and hoarse chants sounded. At the bow of the ship, at the very front, Huaisher looked at the number of reinforcements and waved his hand behind him. Then, a fierce light appeared on the horizon. The trajectory correction was complete. The origin substance lock was complete. Super long-range attack. Isis's tier fire. Under the rumbling of the ironstone heart, the overflowing flood swept through the void and gushed out. In an instant, it crossed hundreds of kilometers and descended on the ruins. The overflowing flood of the Nile River plowed through the earth along with the silt, forming a sharp angle with the original traces of the cannons. The deep worm was instantly cut in half. The massive skeletal spider and the white wind cannon, which had not been able to support it, were swallowed up by the silt and wailed as they were corroded and dissolved. They did not feel satisfied with the results of the battle just now. Sunship had left and returned. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. The sharp sound of bells burst forth one after another. The plague cavalrymen who had just gotten off their horses got back on their horses at the fastest speed in their lives, under the orders of their officers, and gathered. However, before they could form an organization, countless black dots appeared in the haze in the sky. The flying steel birds spread their wings and swooped down from the storm clouds. Under the support of the origin substance, their wings were wrapped in the glow of origin substance equipment. They crudely controlled the ghost's sacred mark and smashed into the ground as if they were going to die together. Waves of air swept across. After 3 rounds of Iron Crow's bombardment, smoke rose up. The giant beasts struggled fiercely, and the ruins had been completely razed to the ground. From time to time, the metal bombs buried in the battlefield and ruins would be triggered, bringing another casualty to the plague cavalrymen. That group of people from the Discovery Realm? The Grand Knight looked at the end of his line of sight in a daze. His face twitched. It was unknown whether he was furious or shocked. The sword hilt in his hand was almost twisted out of shape. How dare they? How dare they? After breaking through the blockade, they did not escape. Instead, they turned back and started a second round of war. They actually dared to face the corrupt order head-on? Ignore the wounded. Everyone close to me. Gather, gather. In anger, the Grand Knight roared. Dark green flames rose from his armor. The plague giant beast under him roared and trampled on the ground. Let this group of people from the Discovery Realm have a taste of our power. In a few short moments, the plague cavalrymen who had been attacked regrouped again. They covered the dozens of giant spider spirits and the remaining giant beasts and launched a counterattack in the direction of Sunship. Rings of light descended from the sky and blessed their bodies. A large group of energy gathered, causing the Grand Knight's strength and body at the front to rapidly increase. The long sword in his hand that the banquet master had given him lit up with a purple-red glow. It greedily extracted fresh blood and origin substance, bringing about a solidified qualitative change that belonged to the plague domain. The enemy has launched a counterattack. On the bow of the ship, Huaisher turned around and looked at the snake man who was half kneeling on the ground and waiting for orders. "Can you still fight for me, esteemed elder?" He asked softly. "Can you still fight?" "Of course." The esteemed elder nodded. Even if he had just experienced a tragic battle and suffered heavy injuries, his face covered by bandages and stitches did not waver at all. Blood seeped out of the wound. The leader of the group, who was covered in wounds, knelt on one knee and replied sincerely, "I will serve you until you order me to stop." "Very good." Huaisher nodded and reached out his hand to press her face. "Then go. Go and ask Hell to mobilize its army. I did not come here for peace." Under his 5 fingers, a miserable shriek burst forth. The bandages and stitches were quickly torn apart, and the broken scales were rapidly falling off. What replaced them was flesh that was rapidly healing and blood-red crystallized scales. For the first time, he bestowed a blessing from Great Sea Ming to a creature of hell. The killing intent that targeted hell and all solidified things circulated in the esteemed elder's body, violently modifying her soul and body. Under the cover of Bahamut's shadow, the pure and majestic divinity circulated, bringing endless power. It was as if a fragment of the sun had descended on her soul. The eye sockets that had blinded her shot out a blazing light at this moment. More blessings appeared from the white-scale guards and the undead army behind her. The gate of the ultimate opened, and the flock of crows swept in. They turned into origin substance and attached themselves to their bodies, bringing them the miracle and power of ghosts. They were all pulled into their flock, becoming an extension of Great Sea Ming. When Huaishir raised his hand again, a crisp cracking sound could be heard. The old dead skin was shed. The huge wound healed, and the broken limbs returned to their original form. Under the blessings of Great Sea Ming's divinity, a complete transformation was ushered in. The esteemed elder with 4 arms and a snake tail slowly propped up her body, and sharp bone blades grew out from her 4 arms. Ash-white hair fell from her shoulders, bringing with it the unique coldness of the Nagas, like dancing snowflakes. Biting cold air spread out. As you wish. She raised her sharp finger and blinded what was left of her right eye without hesitation. The light that burst out from her left eye became even more violet. It was so dazzling that no one could look at it directly. The new crown wearer grinned and smiled ferociously. I will bring destruction to them. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.